Jason Winston and Councilmember Byron Amos. Before we adopt the agenda, colleagues, I do want to make a quick tweak. So for presentations, we only have one presentation listed. However, I've asked for the administration to come by to talk about some of the things happening with Forest Cove and the relocation of the residents there, and to just really give us an update about what's happening. And so it's not on the agenda, but we will be talking about that during the presentation portion of the agenda. And with that, oh, actually one more thing. I know we have a number of folks here for appointments. We have a lot of appointments today, and so recognizing that there's a lot of busy people and people who are doing the work of the people in various capacities, we'll take that portion before we go on to presentations. But with that, just I want to state that for the public, and I'll move to adopt the agenda. There's already been a second by Councilmember Bakhtiari. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
All right, the agenda has been adopted. 4 yeas, 0 nays. Next is the approval of the minutes. I will move to approve the minutes. Second by Bakhtiari. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
All right, the minutes are adopted. 4 yeas, 0 nays. That takes us on to public comment. I understand there's 9 folks signed up for public comment, and we'll get that populated with the order of our public speakers. So one second. All right, our first speaker is Brother Antonio Muhammad. You have 3 minutes.
I am that I am a niggas, king of kings. I am a soulful, spiritual, divine, dark matter, antimatter, masculine energy. And I command the ancestors. I command the mama of the cosmos. The first energy of the cosmos is a feminine energy. Dark matter, antimatter, known as mama of the cosmos. She wants you to know, I got your back, dark matter, anti-physical energy on earth. The first physical energy on earth is a feminine energy. And she wants you to know you have to return back to your Akashic records, your soul's energy, because you are the teacher of the duality and polarity of the masculine and feminine energy. She wants you to know you got to be able to the highest quality of character, highest quality of integrity. You, the daughters of the earth and the father of the earth, who represent 180 degrees. Mama representing 180 degrees, give you 306 degrees. And I call on this committee to recognize that we have to call on the Senator John Osborne, Senator Walnut, because here in Atlanta we continue to let monies that should be helping the poor, dark matter, antimatter, divine, feminine, masculine energy, but we let it go back to the federal government. I call on you, Democrats, to know that you represent a party that continue in the 21st century to exploit and colonize the dark matter, antimatter of the Congo. You got the vice president representing Joe Biden over in Africa as I talk, asking the young children, 14 and under 15 years old, to continue to mine for the minerals so they can do what? Create the e-car batteries. This is your government, your Democratic Party. And I ask you what we're going to do. Are we going to continue to let these senators, John off, and Senator Walnut to talk about how the Democrats can do what they want for the benefit of the whole, but yet you don't want to look after the dark matter children who are suffering. Right here in Atlanta, you got children living on the street with their mothers, their fathers, because they don't have affordable houses. You let money continue to go back to help these people, but you don't speak out. We are the majority citizens of this city, the capital city of Atlanta. How is it that you can have a religion, which I do not believe in the Roman Catholic Church religion anymore, from your books of Genesis to Revelation? You have not one human being in the Roman Catholic Church religion that was born from a woman's womb canal, but yet you can call this a religion that is harmonious for the whole of the 306 degrees of the universe, as above, as below. I greet you as I did not greet you. Assalamu alaikum. Arshay, and Arshay. Marat Matrat Hotel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brother Muhammad. Our next speaker is Prophet Curtis Martin Hairston. You'll have 3 minutes.
Amen. Praise God. Father, the brother there. In Jesus' name. Well, I'm actually want to talk about Cop City. You're trying to put a concentration camp inside of a black community, again, where it was denied from Buckhead. So Atlanta bought property in DeKalb County. Now they want to put a concentration camp where y'all will test bombs and shoot guns inside of a black community. Now we can't stand for that. That's denial. Denial. You know, now the council people, y'all do the right thing. You wouldn't want nobody shooting guns around your child where they're in school. Now, how does that even regulate and sound? Kids going to school, they got to hear guns fired while they're taking tests. Does that make sense? That don't even make sense. Now, the other thing is this. Homelessness. A trans man, and trans men are not the only one killing people, but there was a trans man that killed those 3 children down in Memphis. Now, for a person to do that, that's more than just trans, and it's more than just somebody being depressed. But it happened again. But I'm walking past girls that are screaming, talking to themselves. They want to kill themselves because they're homeless and don't nobody care. But I'm walking past girls and guys that I'm having to break them up from fighting because both of them got mental problems. I'm walking past men and women that are screaming, talking to themselves, mentally homeless out here on y'all streets, on our streets, church streets, that still talking and still threatening them own selves. I'm talking to girls and guys that want to kill themselves because they're homeless in your city, in your county, Fulton County, DeKalb County, Gwinnett County, all your counties, because I'm in all of them. Now, I said before, and I'm going to say it again, God don't like ugly. And the judgment must begin first at the house of God. I am a prophet of God. Like I said, I told you a pandemic was coming, and another pandemic is coming. I told you that before it happened, but you still don't want to believe. You want to treat the prophet in the way you want to treat the prophet. Okay, go ahead. And there's a scripture that says, touch not mine anointing and do my prophet no harm. Y'all go to church. I know all y'all pastors. Let that sink in. Now, let me say this. There was a tornado a couple of months ago, wasn't it? Then when the church top came off the church, there was wind and tornadoes flowing around and stuff. So y'all don't want to pay attention to those type of things until it happens. See, when let me tell you how you know it's God. Let me tell you how you know it's God.
Thank you, Prophet Asher. Your time has expired.
When 3 cars is turned over and 1 is not, then you know it's God. Write that down.
Thank you. Before we go on to our next speaker, Ms. Henry Jordan, as you work her way up to the podium, we have been joined by council members Antonio Lewis and Keisha Shawn Waits. Ms. Jordan, oh, there you are.
Give honor to the Spirit of God to everyone that's here. Be ye not unequally yoked together with the unbelievers. For what fellowship has righteousness with darkness? And what communion has light with darkness? Has righteousness with unrighteousness? And what communion has light with darkness? 2 Corinthians 6, chapter 14, verse. Negatively, he is not to have fellowship with any unfruitful works of darkness, that is, not indulge in the sins of the unsaved. James Scripture said he desires to live holy and didn't, and Jesus said he would work against his word. I informed James what Christ said about him, so I read the scriptures to him, that they might shoot in secret at the perfect. Suddenly they shoot at him, and fear not. Psalm 64, chapter 4th verse. The psalm was a prayer that the vicious plots of wicked men against the righteous might fail. We need to repent to receive Jesus' help, but have renounced the hidden things of dishonesty, not walking in craftiness, nor handling the word of God deceitfully, but by manifestation of the truth, commending ourselves to every man's conscience in the sight of God. 2 Corinthians 4th chapter, 2nd verse. The terror of the Lord is best understood in the general sense of the fear of the Lord, as it is found in the sight of God. 2 Corinthians 4th chapter, 2nd verse. The terror of the Lord is best understood in the general sense of the fear of the Lord, as it is found throughout the scriptures, like chapter 31st verse. Because thy loving kindness is better than life, my lips shall praise thee. Psalm 63:3. David declares his longing for spiritual renewal. He expresses his thankful mood. He gives voice to his trust in God, and he announces his hope in the future. Let our future be to disobey Satan and to obey our Lord Jesus Christ. It's hope we obey Jesus. It's no hope when we disobey Jesus. It's a promise from the word, and God cannot lie. God put a curse on sin, not me. That's why I want to be in his word and his will, to fight sin in me, around me, and in others. And God, you can't tell God that you weren't warned about your sin.
Thank you, Ms. Jordan. Our next speaker is Dr. Yomi Noibi.
Good afternoon, Chairperson, those here, members of this committee. I thank you for the opportunity to speak very briefly on behalf of EcoAction, Environmental Community Action statewide group helping communities to organize to address environmental health issues. I'm speaking on behalf of our Executive Director, Carla Lewis. I was the former Executive Director. What I'm saying is threefold. EcoAction has been engaged in helping communities organize to facilitate community engagement with regard into the process of developing planning for parks over the past 20 plus years. And in the process of doing that, I'm here to request that what EcoAction would like to see is sustainable and equitable maintenance of all parks. Let me say that with sustainable and equitable maintenance of all parks, not just some parks. And in order for that to happen, I'm saying that we have to have scheduled maintenance, which I believe is the life wire of a sustainable park. If we don't have scheduled maintenance and it's not budgeted for, it does not happen. And we have examples in our parks, as we all know. It's not just for recreation today, it also serves as a reservoir, as a place, as a source where you are able to catch up storm water so that we don't have sewer overflow in Atlanta. That's a big problem that you all know about. So the parks are serving as a system of nature to help us address flooding issues in Metro Atlanta. And can you please help me pass this to the council members? These are pictures of flooding issues in Four Corners Park that are related to inadequacy of green infrastructure at this particular park. EcoAction, we work in many parks supporting Park Pride and others that are helping to ensure equity in the process of developing parks. So what am I asking for? What is EcoAction asking for? That you should please support and advance equitable funding, sustainable funding for the Department of Parks and Recreation so that they can do what they have to do, not just for a few parks, for all parks. So let us focus on equitable outcomes, embodying social and environmental economics. If indeed we want sustainable and equitable maintenance for all parks in Atlanta.
Thank you, Dr. Yomi.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
All right, our next speaker is Dr. Nataki Osborne-Jelks.
Thank you, Chairman Dozier, and to all the members of the council who are assembled. My name is Dr. Nataki Osborne-Jelks. I'm a resident of the Cascade Heights community, and I'm also co-founder and executive director of the West Atlanta Watershed Alliance, otherwise known as WAWA. I'm here today to also talk about an increase in funding for the parks budget, particularly in terms of maintenance and stewardship. If equity is a priority for this city, more equitable investments are needed across parks in all neighborhoods in the city. If it were not for grassroots organizations like WAWA, or for the work of everyday citizens who do things like pull invasive plants, pick up trash, and sometimes even mow city parks on their own, the divide would look even greater between parks in more affluent parts of our community, who often have maintenance and stewardship subsidized by park conservancies, and those parks in more economically challenged areas of the city. In the English Avenue neighborhood, there is a community a green team in which organizations such as Park Pride, the Conservation Fund, Partnership for Southern Equity, and WAWA have invested dollars and supported the training and development of this neighborhood-led green team to maintain green infrastructure features in the Lindsay Street, Maddie Freeland, and Katherine Johnston Memorial Parks. This green team has more specialized training and knowledge than many of the Parks Department workforce in terms of green infrastructure. And that's because of the lack of investment in advanced training and the lack of bodies to share in the massive work that our Parks Department needs to do. I also want to point out the need for more resources to be allocated to nature preserves, such as the Outdoor Activity Center, where WAWA's home is, and the Cascade Springs Nature Preserve, which is my neighborhood park. While there has been a steady build over the years, visitation to Atlanta's nature preserves reached a crescendo during the height of the pandemic that has been sustained. These green jewels in our communities don't get the resources that they deserve, nor do they get adequate resources to match the stress placed on them through increased visitation. In many instances, they don't even show up in the Parks Department's funding matrix because they are not traditional parks. This has to change, and it can change with more investments. I'll end by just saying that a well-maintained park system must be a standard and not an exception to the rule. So I'm asking, as you deliberate, as you're working with your colleagues in the Parks Department, we need to ensure that more funding is invested in maintenance for our parks. If we're going to maintain a system that we all can be proud of, if we want to make sure that every citizen lives within a 10-minute walk of a quality park, then investment in maintenance and stewardship has to be a priority. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nataki. All right, up next is Rob Bronner. There you are.
Good afternoon. My name is Rob Bronner. I am a resident of Ponce Highland and the executive director of the Atlanta Beltline Partnership. We are the 501c3 nonprofit that supports the Beltline vision through fundraising, programming, and advocacy. Councilmember Dozier, thank you for your leadership on the ABI board, and thank you to all the council members with whom we have worked in the past and for your support of the Atlanta Beltline over the years. I am here today to support Atlanta's Parks Department and encourage you all to think not only about funding for the FY24 budget, but really to think boldly about long-term funding solutions. You know about unfunded parks positions, comparisons to other cities on cost per acre, long mowing cycles, all the other data that supports the need for more funding. I'm not here to beat those drums. I want to discuss what's possible. I want to discuss what we can achieve if, drawing on the words of our mayor, we draw circles around our parks and we treat them like a group project. Some of you attended Park Pride's conference yesterday. You heard all the ways that parks improve quality of life, including their critical connection to public health. Simply stated, parks make people live longer. I know you heard the mayor cite the hundreds of acres being acquired for parks at the State of the City this morning, and I know we all continue to want to see Atlanta's ascension up the park score rankings. How do we do it? We must work together to grow the funding pie, and high-quality, well-funded parks maintenance is the key to doing that. I've been with the Atlanta Beltline Partnership since 2006. During that time, we have raised approximately $200 million to support the Beltline, and the vast majority of that has been for parks and trails. Within the past few years, and in response to significant public investment, like the Special Service District that the City Council passed in 2021, we raised more than $100 million from the Robert W. Woodruff Foundation and the James M. Cox Foundation to complete the full 22-mile Beltline Trail Corridor, and $17 million from the Blank Foundation to help open the first phase of West Side Park. Right now, we are actively pursuing many, many millions of philanthropic dollars to build Enota Park and future phases of West Side Park, both on the west side. We are not alone. Many park-focused nonprofits, including those I serve with on the Mayor's Green Advisory Council, secure substantial investments from donors to grow and improve Atlanta's park system. But there is more money sitting on the sidelines. I can tell you that the generosity of Atlanta's donors has come despite the city not having a long-term funding plan to maintain a best-in-class park system. A long-term funding solution is the key to unlocking major investments. Taxpayers, foundations, people just want to have confidence that the city will take care of their investment in parks. You've got a smart, energetic Parks Commissioner who will be honest about what it costs to maintain the system and deliver a high standard of care. And you have lots of partners in the nonprofit and philanthropic community ready to work with you to help you figure this out so that Atlanta can be a best-in-class park system. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bronner. Our next speaker is Michael Halicki.
Getting to be a regular occurrence. So number one, I want to thank you for giving me a moment to speak with you today. We're coming off of a lot of great activity. This past weekend, we announced, went public with our $12.8 million Parks for All campaign. Yesterday, we had a few friends over to the Botanical Garden. Around 500 people showed up for our conference focused on the healing power of parks. This is budget season. And we are approaching budget season, pulling out all the stops this year. You've been hearing over these different meetings a range of different partners that are all bringing this message that we need to see an increase in funding for park maintenance. And I think some of the different things that we've heard today really underscore those elements. There's an article that Maria Saporta wrote that highlights our campaign, and in there it has a healthy dose of a portion that looks at the fact that it is a new bar. It's a new day in the city, and it's a reflection of this administration, this mayor, this parks commissioner, and this council that are really leaning in a lot of different ways. And we have some great wins to look at. The $12.8 million campaign that we've announced, we're 70% towards that goal. And the first dollars in were from the Woodruff Foundation in the city of Atlanta. More recently, we had $2.8 million of discretionary dollars that have come from different council members. And I heard in this room, as we had the Parks Commissioner sharing his effort, Councilmember Lewis sharing that council members are stepping up. We really need to make sure that we're stepping up on the maintenance side of things to maintain our parks and make sure that we have an adequate budget. So I think we have a lot to be proud of in terms of where we're at. I think Rob's point is well taken, that there's money sitting on the sidelines, and even with this campaign getting from 70%, we get a lot of questions about whether or not there's going to be a change. I often have described to folks this Parks for All campaign that we're doing things differently and expecting a different result. And I think so too, we need to move to a point that the budget conversation is not a budget that is so constrained that the Parks Department is not equipped to do the job that it's supposed to do. In that column that I shared, it mentions that there's a 26% gap right now in terms of positions within the Parks Department, open positions within the Parks Department. So 1 in 4. And out of those, 60% of those positions are unfunded. So just to get to the funding for filling those unfunded positions, you would need about a $2 million increase from where we're at right now, and that only gets us to the level of park maintenance that we had before the pandemic. So I would just encourage you, as you're talking to the administration and they're asking what your priorities, and I've spoken to some of you that unsolicited have shared that park maintenance is at the very top of your list. When you look at issues of park equity, the single thing that raises the floor for our parks is getting to the point that we're addressing adequate maintenance. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, our next speaker is Catherine Spillman.
Good afternoon. My name is Catherine Spillman, and I'm the Executive Director of the Atlanta Memorial Park Conservancy in the 8th District. Thank you for allowing me the time to talk with you about the need for additional funding for park maintenance in the City of Atlanta. Today, I will share some of the Atlanta Memorial Park Conservancy's experiences on maintenance issues in Atlanta Memorial Park. While each park in the city has its own unique set of issues, some of the maintenance issues I will be discussing today are maintenance issues experienced throughout our park system. These ongoing issues need attention, which only additional dollars dedicated to maintenance can help solve. As Executive Director of the Atlanta Memorial Park Conservancy for the last 9 years, and a park volunteer and advocate for many years before that, I have witnessed the ebbs and flows in the city being able to provide the level of maintenance in our parks that we all need and deserve from a world-class city. Atlanta is a city that others aspire to become. We need to live up to that standard, and having exceptional parks that are well-maintained is one of the ways to do that. If COVID did anything positive for our city, it highlighted how important parks are for the mental health and well-being of its citizens. With more people using parks than ever before, and with the additional 260 acres that were added just last year, we cannot continue to underfund maintenance needs in our parks. In the last few years, I have sometimes struggled to get trash cans that are overflowing emptied, slippery, mud-covered sidewalks cleared, broken playground equipment fixed, and DDH trees that could fall on park visitors removed. I provided some examples, 2 copies for y'all to review. It's not that these issues are being ignored by the Parks Department. It's that there is either such a backlog or a staffing shortage that these issues are sometimes not being resolved in a timely manner. Every single Parks employee I know does the best that they can do under the circumstances. It's simply that they are stretched too thin from top to bottom. We all know the feeling of juggling too many balls in the air. That is what is happening with maintenance in our parks. Imagine each ball is an acre of parkland being maintained, and then add 260 more balls to what you're already juggling. The city can't manage or maintain all of those acres successfully without additional help in the way of funding. Balls will begin to drop and are dropping. In some cases, the balls can bounce back. In the case of overflowing trash cans, they just need to be emptied. Other balls don't bounce back and can have serious consequences. DDH trees that are left standing can fall on visitors or on maintenance workers. I have personally experienced one near miss from a diseased ash branch that fell 5 feet away from me when we were having a volunteer day in the park.
Thank you, Ms. Spillman. Time has expired.
Thank you.
All right, our final speaker is Joanna Powell.
Everyone, my name is Joanna Powell, and I am representing MPUG. I am the secretary, and I am also the park chair. And I have been trying to get our park in our neighborhood. It's a neighborhood park. And most people, when they think of parks, they're thinking of big parks. But the neighborhood parks are always neglected. And I grew up in the neighborhood in which I now moved back into my neighborhood. And my neighborhood is composed of mostly seniors that want to use our park. And they can't use our park because it's not handicap accessible. And the track that surrounds our park, it is not rubberized, so it has bothered their knees. And now those seniors go to Cobb County to take advantage of their parks and recs, which is ridiculous to me. So I wanted to know, how can we get a permanent line item for park maintenance? Not just, 1 year to the next year, permanent, just like other departments. So that's all I wanted to say is related to Lillian Cooper Shepherd Park. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Waits.
I wanted to know the park that she was speaking of. Okay.
Thank you. That, Councilmember Bakhtiari.
I know Councilmember Dozier is going to kill me for not keeping to time, but just wanted to say that I really appreciate, I know that we all do, that you all are coming down here, and I know we have a lot to do in terms of parks. And my hope is that after this year, we'll see a commitment showing that beyond council members, but in the budget, that we are committed to maintaining parks. And I hope that after this year, we will be able to prioritize the discussion of youth employment and connecting kids to their green spaces and doing educational programming, because that is the big part here that is missing. So you have many allies on council, some who gave more than others, but you have many allies on council, and excited to work with you all past just maintenance and into programming and youth development. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lewis.
I want to say thank you to the folks that came down and talk about parks today. Did anyone come down and talk about recreation as well? The reason why I would like to say is because parks and recreation is one department, and we got to make sure that we include all of the parks and the recreation part of it. When we heard folks talking about the small parks, I'm glad we had folks talk about the small parks. In my district, we are flattered and we're extremely happy to have so many small parks, but they don't get the attention that the larger parks on the north side of the city have gotten. But we are flushed in my district with recreation centers. We have the most recreation centers in the city of Atlanta. And we're getting a lot of calls from folks from recreation centers. I would like for, if you're under the sound of our voice on TV, start coming down because parks and recreation both need increases to match the other stuff. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Lewis. All right, I believe that concludes public comment. Up next on the agenda, like I mentioned before, presentations is the next item on the agenda. However, we're going to take these communications first. As a reminder, we have 9 communications, and we'll start with item number 1, Mr. Keith Sharp. But Jared, if you can sound that caption, and we'll go from there.
Item number 1, 23C5048, a communication from Councilmember Dustin Hillis appointing Mr. Keith Sharp to serve as a member of the Chattahoochee Brick Company Memorial Green Space and Park Board.
All right, and Mr. Sharp, I know I met you about 45 minutes ago out in the hallway, but like I said before, if you don't mind, tell us a little about yourself and why you're interested in the appointment.
Thank you, Chairman Dozier. Members of the council, my name is Keith Sharp. I live on Hollywood Road in the Riverside neighborhood of MPUD in District 9. And I appreciate your consideration of my appointment to this committee. 12 years ago, founded a nonprofit called Riverwalk Atlanta with the vision of creating a 5-mile greenway of parks and trails along the Chattahoochee River inside the city limits of Atlanta. Did you know that with one exception, there's no public access to hiking trails on the river, even though we have an 8-mile border with the river? That one exception is the Whitewater Creek entrance to the National Recreation Area. And for 3 miles beyond that, it's private property, Buckhead Estates. But from Peachtree Creek down to Sandy Creek, it is feasible to have parks and greenway. The centerpiece along that is where Proctor Creek enters the river, and that's where the Chattahoochee Brick property is. And that this vision for a park and trail corridor along the river is what brought Chattahoochee Brick to my attention over 10 years ago. In 2015, we started advocating to stop the industrial development of that site. And in recent years, thanks to the civil rights leaders, we were able to see that property acquired by the city. We have a great vision for creating a memorial to the least convict labor practices that were endured on that site, and I look forward to being a member of this committee.
Thank you. Opening the floor to colleagues for questions and comments. Councilmember Lewis.
Thank you so much for this. To see the Riverwalk ATL org, I lived in San Antonio for about 6 months, and so I was able to see what a Riverwalk would look like and what it would do for a community. So I'm excited to see this. I think Atlanta is one of the only major cities that is a city that sits between two rivers, right? We sit between the Chattahoochee, but we got 63 miles of Fulton County of South River on the other side. And so I would love to see some folks, if you're on the sound of my voice, to create something like this for South River. And myself and Councilmember Jason Winston and Jason Dozier and Councilmember Liliana Bakhtiari, we can't wait to champion something like this for South River to get it flowing again, because I grew up fishing and catching tadpoles in South River, and I can't wait to see the water start moving again. So thank you for this.
That sounds like a motion.
So moved.
All right, I'll second by Winston. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
All right, the item is approved, 5 yeas, 0 nays. Thank you for your service to the city of Atlanta. All right, next item, item number 2. Ms. Ola Reynolds, if you can come up to the podium, and Jared's on the caption.
It's 23C5049, a communication from Councilmember Dustin Hillis appointing Ms. Ola Reynolds to serve as a member of the Chattahoochee Brick Company Memorial Green Space and Park Board.
All right, Ms. Reynolds, good to see you again.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon to each of you. As you know, my name is Ola Reynolds, and just a little bit about me. I have lived in Northwest Atlanta for 50-plus years. I know I don't look like it, but I have. And also Northwest Atlanta in the community of Monroe Heights. I'm a former chairperson for Neighborhood Planning Unit G, and I am still very active in my community. And my reason for being interested in the Chattahoochee Brick Company Memorial Green Space, because the community still need to have a voice, and I will be a voice crying in the wilderness for my community. And I'm so glad to hear Councilmember Lewis being excited by a park, because with that being said, with more parks coming, you know, we're going to need more money. So I just had to add that as well. And also for our small parks, the pocket parks, because I'm expecting to have a pocket park in my community in the Monroe Heights, and we're going to need funds to maintain that park. That is something coming up. Maybe I shouldn't have said, but I mean, I've said it now. So that is one of my reasons being interested. You heard what Mr. Sharp said about the Chattahoochee Trail. He and I have worked for years, and because we are neighboring NPUs, G and D connects. And so we just want to keep things going. We have a momentum going, and excited about what happened that the Chattahoochee Brick Company has been purchased. And so we just want to see things to keep moving as is. So that's why I am interested in being on the committee.
All right, motion by Winston to approve, second by Amos. Please open the vote.
Vote is open. The vote is closed.
Item is approved, 5 yeas, 0 nays. Thank you so much, and thank you for your continued service to the city of Atlanta.
Thank you, sir.
All right, next item is number 3. Mr. David Getachew Smith, if you could come to the podium. And apologies for stumbling on the name.
It's item number 23, 23C5050, a communication from Mayor Andre Dickens appointing Mr. David Getachew Smith Sr. to serve as a member of the Chattahoochee Brick Company Memorial Green Space and Park Board.
All right, same as
Good
before.
afternoon.
Good afternoon.
It's David Getachew Smith. I do
Getachew.
this every day, so I'm quite used to it. I'm a native Atlantan, grew up on the west side, and I live in the Cascade community. I've been chair of NPUQ, done lots of different things in terms of government. I sought participation with regard to the Chattahoochee Brick Company. In my case, it's probably personal. I'm quite a genealogist, and I discovered that I had a great-great-uncle who lived in an area down in South Fulton. Today we call it Palmetto. And he, along with another group of gentlemen, were all arrested. It was claimed that it was instigated by northern agitators, claimed that they attempted to burn the downtown. Eventually, several of them were lynched, and my great-great-uncle was only shot. But he eventually went to the Georgia Penitentiary, and from the Georgia Penitentiary, guess what happened? Someone came by, bought a lease, and he was sent to the Durham Mines, which is up in North Georgia. The Durham Mines were owned by the same people that owned the Chattahoochee Brick Company, which was James English, who was a former mayor of Atlanta. And in addition to that, he was also the police commissioner. So you can imagine that there's a little bit of a conflict there. But this is a history that very few of us know about, and I see this as an opportunity to have that reckoning with here in our city.
Thank you, Mr. Getachew Smith. Any questions or comments from colleagues? Motion to approve by Bakhtiari, second by Lewis. Please open the vote.
Vote is open. The vote is closed.
All right, item carries 5 yeas, 0 nays. Thank you so much for your service to the City of Atlanta. All right, I believe our next item is number 4. Ms. Janice Ware, if you could come to the podium, and Jerry reading the caption.
It's 23C5051, a communication from Mayor Andre Dickens reappointing Ms. Janice Ware to serve as the Fulton County City of Atlanta Land Bank Authority, serve on the Fulton County City of Atlanta Land Bank Authority. This appointment is for a term of 4 years to begin retroactively March 18th, 2023 and expire March 17th, 2027.
Ms. Ware, as same as before, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're interested in the appointment.
So, good afternoon. My name is Janice Ware, and I am the Executive Director of Sumac Community Development Corporation, an organization that was started by my father, Anna J. Lowell Ware, and Rosa Burney in the Mechanicsville area of the city of Atlanta. And over the last 32 years, we have successfully developed independently and in partnership with for-profit developers over 1,700 housing units. So we're excited about that. I also wear the hat of being the publisher of the Atlanta Voice newspaper, an institution, again, that was started by my father, located in Mechanicsville. And I've been working there for 42 years now. So I'm very committed. I'm a native Atlantan, born and raised, public schools, and the University of Georgia graduate. I've served on the Atlanta Land Bank Authority many times, well, before, and I'm really excited about continuing that service. We're doing some great work and identifying and soliciting funding that we have never seen before, so I'm excited about the work that we can continue to do.
Well, before I turn it over to Councilmember Lewis for a question or comment, I'm going to take a point of personal privilege to make the motion to approve, but I'll give Councilmember Lewis the floor to ask any questions.
And I think it's already been moved in second. So I think my questions are, you served on the board before.
Yes.
Right now, we've talked about affordable housing in a different way. We've rebrought the conversation of low-income housing, which your father in Mechanicsville has seen done right. If you look at even what Columbia did with the new Mechanicsville apartments.
Yes.
And so as we continue to move forward, how do you feel about low-income housing?
So one of our projects that the City of Atlanta has awarded funding to us for is for Rosa Burney Manor Apartments, which is 54 units of some of the most affordable, unsubsidized housing units in the city of Atlanta. So I want to thank the city for giving us that additional funding, which was about $1.9 million, so we appreciate that. It is critical that we make certain that people who want to live in the city of Atlanta can afford to live here, to be able to participate in the growth and the development, which is not always the way the city has done business. And if we're not careful, those opportunities will continue to diminish. So I think that covers it.
No, I appreciate you. I think as you step into it this time, I think that the workforce housing, and low-income housing has to be uplifted as a voice in the room when you think about Mechanicsville, Pittsburgh, Summer Hill, Peoplestown, and the land that the city, because we got the gold. Thomasville, when it comes back, Leela Valley, Pool Creek, Jonesboro South, Jonesboro North, we got the gold. But we need to start hearing the word workforce housing, and low-income housing.
So if you look at the history of SUMAC, we've actually always focused on mixed income housing. Our first development would have been Rosa Bernie Apartments, which was in 1999, 54 units. We started there. And some of the residents that were living there did not want us to renovate the units because they thought they would not be able to afford to remain in those properties after we renovated. We committed to those seniors that we would keep them there for as long as they wanted to live there or were alive, and we did that. So our commitment has been there. Then we did some of the first affordable townhouses that started at $95,000. Now, the analysis said we would only sell one unit every 2 months. I was able to sell 16 units in 45 days. So it really goes against the core that people don't want to buy, they're not interested in buying, so we're committed to that. The new project, which Mr. Dozier is well aware of, is going to be a higher income level in some of the units. We will definitely preserve 20% of those units for people who want to continue to live in the Mechanicsville area or would want to live there who have not lived there before. So it has to be a balance.
Thank you, Councilman Lewis, and thank you, Ms. Ware. Please open the vote.
Is there a second?
Amos.
Vote is open.
Calculating.
The vote is closed.
All right, item is accepted. 5 ayes, 0 nays. Thank you for your continued service to the city of Atlanta.
Thank you for your support. Thank you.
All right, next item, number 5, Ms. Michelle Nelson, if you can come to the podium. Okay, well, we'll move to item number 6, Mr. Joel Alvarado.
Item number 6. Go ahead. Item number 6 is 23R3340, and resolution by Councilmember Jason Dozier appointing Mr. Joel Alvarado to serve on the Atlanta Housing Authority Board of Commissioners for a term of 5 years, scheduled to begin upon the approval of this resolution and for other purposes.
Likewise, tell us a little bit about yourself, Mr. Alvarado, and why you are interested in this appointment.
Well, good afternoon, all. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be able to speak a little bit about who I am and why I want to serve in this capacity. My name is Joel Alvarado. I have the honor and privilege of serving as Vice President for Strategy and Engagement of Partnership for Southern Equity, led by by Nathaniel Smith. And we work to advance racial equity in the American South and the metropolitan Atlanta region. And for me, this is an opportunity to give back to a city that's given so much to me personally and professionally. As many of you know, I came down here in Atlanta in 1991 to attend Morehouse College, never left. Atlanta is my home. I love Atlanta. I love what it can be. It hasn't always loved me back the way I wanted it to, but that doesn't mean that this is not a relationship that I can build upon and I can pour into. And I'm fortunate and humble that I've been offered this opportunity by the mayor and hopefully by your support to serve in this capacity. I know housing is at the forefront of the conversation that's being had. I want to leverage my years, over 2 decades of experience in government, in policy work, in higher education, in nonprofit advocacy, lobbying, what have you, in believing in working with other board members and working with the Atlanta Housing Authority in order to realize what we all want. Atlanta should be open for all people to live here, to work here, to play here, and we need housing to do that. So I'm honored and I'm humbled and I'm ready for the challenge to step up and do the work with my colleagues, hopefully in the Board of Commissioners for Atlanta Housing Authority, in order to ensure that your vision is realized and the mayor's vision is realized and the community's vision is realized as it deals with housing in the city of Atlanta. Thank you.
Councilman Waits.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sir, it's always a pleasure to see you. Generally, I run into you and your wife dining at our favorite restaurant, but housing is such a huge issue and challenge here in the city of Atlanta, and so it's just a pleasure to see that you will be working in that area and joining all of us in terms of figuring out some solutions to some of the toughest challenges that we face. And so it's a pleasure to welcome you to this commission, and I know you'll do an outstanding job. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Councilmember Lewis.
Similar to the last person on Atlanta housing, I agree with Councilmember Waits when you say how important housing is to the city of Atlanta, but we have to start back talking about low-income housing and workforce housing. So how do you feel about those two?
I'm in wholeheartedly support of it. And especially when I'm really, let me say this, Councilman, I think what we have to do is a better job of educating the public of what those terms mean, right? Because there is a perception that derives. But when we talk about workforce housing, we could be talking about our school teachers. We could be talking about EMS. We could be talking about firefighters. We could be talking about people who have college education, who are first responders, people who are doing phenomenal work for us every day, but can't afford to live in the city that they work in. And we have to ask ourselves a question, should we accept that? Is that appropriate? Is that right? Is that just? Is that equitable? And so I wholeheartedly support it, and I look forward to working with you in my capacity in order to make it real so that people, all people feel like the city of Atlanta is open to them regarding housing.
Yeah, and I'm also talking about a sanitation worker, right?
Absolutely.
I'm talking about my friend BJ, who picks up my trash every single Friday morning. I'm talking about the man that's going down, and watershed worker going down into the sewer, got his hands in our feces. I'm talking about the person that makes minimum wage in the state of Georgia. Minimum wage is $5.15 an hour. I'm talking about low income and workforce housing because Atlanta has land, gold, in places where workforce and low income housing used to be, and the community isn't afraid or confused with it coming back. And that's why I was very specific about the places that I mentioned, because I've seen Mechanicsville did it right. When you talk about what they did when they tore down the apartments and they brought back low-income workforce housing in their Rosa Burney apartments. But and Carver Homes did it right in District 1. District 12 has had all of our apartments torn down except Pavilion. And I know that the city right now, when we think about the board that you're about to go into, we got the gold. I want low-income workforce housing, and that's what, and we also had a meeting last week in which Atlanta Housing Authority came and told us they have $50 to $60 million that they have to spend or they'll lose. And so that means we have the funding ourselves to get it done. We already own the land ourselves. And so when folks join the board that you're joining right now, the low-income workforce, the sanitation worker is what I'm thinking about. The man that's in the man or woman that's in our sewer, and the man or woman or person that's filling our potholes. That's what I'm thinking of when I talk about housing.
Understood and agreed. Thank you.
All right. Well, on that note, I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve. Second by Winston. Please open the vote.
Vote is open. The vote is closed.
All right, the item is favorable, 6 yeas, 0 nays. Thank you for your continued service to the city.
Thank you for the honor and privilege.
All right. Colleagues, we still have a few more appointments to go through. However, they're going to have to come off of held, so we'll go ahead and take those off of held. Mr. Bob Morris, is he here? All right. If you come to the podium, and Mr. Evans, if you can read in the caption.
Item number 33, 23C5036, a communication from Ann Phillips, President, Atlanta Planning Advisory Board, submitting the appointment of Mr. Bob Morris to serve as a member of the Atlanta Beltline Tax Allocation District Advisory Committee. This appointment is for a term of 2 years.
Mr. Morris, likewise, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're interested in the appointment.
Thank you very much, first of all, for the opportunity to be here today. My name is Bob Morris. I have lived back in Atlanta for about 3 years. I grew up in South DeKalb County, went to school there, went to school in Forest Park, left and went to college and really never came back. But it's nice to be back. I have a family, a couple grandkids, other family members here, so it's very nice to be back in Atlanta. I live in Chosewood Park in NPUY. When we got back to Atlanta, one of my goals was to get back to the city. I've been on the NPUY board for the last 3 years. I lead the zoning committee. I'm very active in the Chosewood Park community. Thank you. More funding for Chosewood Park, always helpful. Adding my voice to the park funding queue. I appreciate the opportunity to be considered for this position because NPUY and especially Chosewood Park have a huge face on the Beltline. What happens on the Beltline hugely affects Chosewood Park, hugely affects NPUY, as it does the rest of the city. Being a member of a resident of Chosewood Park, I do see what it's like for the South Side and the challenges that the South Side has, and hopefully my being able to work on the Beltline will be able to help influence the Beltline to make sure that those needs of the Southern Side communities are being met.
Any questions or comments for colleagues? Motion to approve by Winston, second by Lewis. And before we open the vote, I just want to say, once upon a time, many moons ago, I held the same appointment with Beltline TADC as the APAP appointee. And the fact that you're also, just like me, a fellow native of South DeKalb, it's really good to see you do wonderful things for the city of Atlanta. So please open the vote.
Vote is open. The vote is closed.
All right, the item is accepted, favorable, 6 yeas, 0 nays. Thank you for your continued
Thank you very
service to
much.
All right, next item off of Hill, number 34, Mr. Ronald Grunwald. Please come to the podium. And Mr. Evans, please read the caption.
It's 23C5037, a communication from Ann Phillips, President, Atlanta Planning Advisory Board, submitting the appointment of Mr. Ronald Grunwald to serve as a member of the Atlanta Beltline Tax Allocation District Advisory Committee. This appointment is for a term of 2 years.
Mr. Grunwald, likewise, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're interested in the appointment.
Great. Yes. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity. I've been a resident of the city of Atlanta for 23 years now. My neighborhood is Loring Heights in NPUE, District 8. I am currently and have been for quite a long time the president of that neighborhood association, the NPU rep, as well as the land use chair. I've also served on the Sub-Area 8 Master Planning Citizen Task Force when they were developing the master plan for that Beltline area, and I'm extremely interested in the development of the Beltline and mostly the implementation, especially by the year 2030. I think that's a big task, and I'd enjoy providing my expertise. My background is as an urban planner. I've worked in city governments, I've done planning consultant, and now I'm on, as they say, the dark side, on the real estate development side. So, but I work within the city and other jurisdictions, and I'm involved in the development and construction end. So I'm looking forward to bringing my skills to this important position.
Any questions or comments from colleagues? Seeing.
I was going to say, I love your Cobb County Braves shirt.
Oh.
Second, the approval, and thank you for being willing to serve.
There's a motion by Lewis, second by Bakhtiari. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. And the vote is closed.
The item is favorable, 6 yeas, 0 nays. Thank you for your service to the city.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right, and then I believe this is our final appointment, former Councilmember Lamar Willis, if you could join us at the podium.
This is item 23C5038, a communication from Tanya Greer, County Clerk, to the Fulton County Board of Commissioners, submitting the appointment of Mr. Lamar Willis to the Atlanta Beltline Tax Allocation District Advisory Committee. This appointment is for a term of 2 years.
Mr. Willis, if you could, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're interested in the appointment.
Thank you all very much for having Mr. Chair, committee members. My name is H. Lamar Willis, formerly a council member. I served for 12 years on the Atlanta City Council. During that time, I had the distinct honor of introducing the legislation to create the Beltline on behalf of former Council President Kathy Willard, who saw this vision and thought that it could be a reality, and now we're living it. And so I'm truly excited about that opportunity to come sort of full circle and be a part of this behemoth project in some small capacity. But that being said, I'm a lifelong resident of Atlanta, went to high school here, college here. Like Mr. Alvarado, I went to Morehouse College. Outside of grad school in Pittsburgh and law school in Boston, I've been in Atlanta pretty much my entire life. And while business takes me out of the city frequently, it never takes my heart away from this place. And so I will always love it. And as I always say, we may not always agree about how we get there, but we all believe in getting there in the right place. And so, I look forward to the opportunity to serve.
Thank you so much. We have a couple of speakers lined up. Councilmember Waits.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Willis, it's always a pleasure to see you. I'm a fellow native as well, and I consider you a friend and mentor. Just want to thank you for your many years of service to Atlanta, and it is a distinct pleasure to follow in your footsteps and some of the work that you've done. So thank you for your service, and thank you for all you've done for our city.
Thank you, Councilmember Waits.
Councilmember Lewis.
To echo Councilmember Waits, thank you for always putting yourself up for service. To serve this body, leave, and then come back. I don't know if you got it all, but I appreciate you for loving Atlanta and joining this particular board, because we know that the Beltline is our piece of thing that will be in history. The Beltline is a piece of thing that will be in history, but to do it equitable, I believe in you. And so now I got a person on that Beltline task force that I'm a call when I see funds getting spent to make sure that the black coffees and the black organizations are equitable on the south side of the city. So walk into it, brother, but answer your phone still.
Always. Thank you very much, Councilmember Lewis.
That sounds like a motion from Waits and a second from Lewis. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. And the vote is closed.
All right, the item is favorable, 6 yeas, 0 nays. And congratulations, and thank you very much for your continued service to the city of Atlanta.
Just want to mention that all of the appointment legislation will be at the Committee on Council agenda next April 17th.
Thank you so much. And I believe that concludes all the folks who are here for appointments or communications. So going back to the regular agenda, and then colleagues, just a heads up, I know we had a couple items that are on for communications that need to be held. We'll take care of that legislation when it comes to it, but we're going to move back to presentations. And so we have Mr. Andy Schnegenberger with the Atlanta Housing Commission. If you could come on up, and we'll go ahead and talk about the things that y'all have been working on.
Good afternoon, Chairman Dozier, members of the committee. Thank you for carving out a little bit of time for me this afternoon to give you an update. I am the chair of the Housing Commission. My name is Andy Schnegenberger. I'm a proud resident of the East Atlanta neighborhood, and always happy to put myself up for service when it comes to affordable housing and community-based redevelopment work. I'm here today to give you an update on the work of the commission. We do not have a formally adopted recommendation as yet, but we are in process, and I hope that next month I might be able to come back with an actual recommendation based on what we'll be talking about today. I want to recognize with me today is my co-chair, or my vice chair, Mr. William McFarland, and Ms. Lindsay Siegel, who is here from the Atlanta Legal Aid Society. Both of these folks and others have been incredibly helpful and an indispensable resource as we have worked through this recent issue, which is the rights of tenants in the city of Atlanta. Last year, the commission elected to work on this issue after we had processed through the recommendation on the Housing Trust Fund. So in December, I scheduled a presentation from the Housing Justice League based on the work that they had done on advocacy around this issue. And that really kicked off the work that we've been doing over the couple of months since. What's really driving the focus on this issue is the fact that Georgia has become internationally regarded really as a state that is incredibly lax in its laws that support the rights of tenants. Its laws are heavily favored towards property owners. And as such, there's been an increasing tendency in practice by landlords and property owners to take advantage of those benefits. And some of the practices that we have seen, there's been, the curtain's been pulled back pretty effectively by some of the work that the Atlanta Journal-Constitution has done and some other research that's been done lately. Dan Immergluck in particular, have really shown a light on the deleterious effects of some of these practices on tenants and renters. Sometimes through no fault of their own. The implications of these practices can have long-term financial effects for folks and make it even harder for them to find housing when they've been through a current trial. Literal and figurative at that. So we're working on 7 recommendations. These are being considered at the moment, right? They're not locked in yet, but all of these are based on recognition of the fact that there are certain practices that have really picked up steam amongst property managers and property owners that are making it really difficult for ordinary folks who are just trying to live in an affordable apartment or find an apartment in the first place. The first recommendation really focuses on the need to provide tenants and landlords a greater degree of information around eviction laws, support both parties with established pre-eviction diversion assistance based on input from our friends at Legal Aid and the Atlanta Volunteer Lawyers Foundation. It's clear that there are a number of cases that could be negotiated to satisfactory completion before going to eviction, and there's just not really the environment to support that, and there's certainly not the resources to support it currently. So that's one of the recommendations that we're looking at, is establishing some set of resources that will allow for these pre-eviction diversion negotiations to happen. The second is to provide greater access to counsel for tenants facing eviction, right? That's, data indicates that landlords are represented in eviction court up to 90% of the time, and tenants only maybe 10% of the time. So that's another illustration of the power imbalance in the eviction process, and that it is definitely taken advantage of with what we see as serial eviction filings, where landlords will just file evictions again and again and again, really as a matter of threatening tenants. And often another reason why this kind of service is important is because landlords are beginning to really take advantage of the process when they're not providing decent, safe, habitable housing in the first place. Tenants in Georgia have very limited means to withhold rent when the housing that's being provided for them is substandard. Providing this kind of counsel for folks facing eviction will go a long ways to helping start to balance that power imbalance, at least a little bit. Another suggestion that we are considering is to look at the possibility of increasing the fee to file an eviction. eviction, you see serial evictions and explosion in the filing of eviction because it's so easy to do, and it's incredibly inexpensive. In Fulton County, it's $60. $60. In DeKalb County, it's $54. Our thought is that if it is possible to increase the fee of evictions, I'm sure it'll take some coordination with the county court systems, but if it's possible to do so, that could, number one, start to disincentivize the filing of evictions if it's a little bit more painful for landlords to do so. And number two, that could possibly create a resource to fund some of these other eviction mitigation programs. A fourth recommendation that we're looking at is really sort of taking another step in the resolution that Councilmember Bakhtiari pushed through recently, and that is requiring city agencies, quasi-governmental agencies that enter into agreements with property owners and developers that receive public funding to require them to accept housing vouchers. Right now, it is actually, it seems like it's moving forward on a voluntary basis with the different agencies. We have thought that it might be a good idea to consider making that a requirement so that in the future, that voluntary ability to enforce these agreements will have a little bit more boost behind them, right? There's also another benefit to this, and is ensuring that the language that is adopted by the different quasi-governmental agencies related to housing is similar and consistent across the board, right? Universal language so that everybody's singing from the same sheet of music. Another recommendation is really in response to what has become a very unfortunate practice of landlords in their marketing not being clear about the fact that they charge additional accessory fees in addition to the rent, so that if you are a tenant, a prospective tenant who is seeking to rent from a property owner who follows this practice, you submit an application that has a very high fee, only to find out after you sign your lease or when you get your lease paper to look at that, oh, there's all these different fees that sometimes can add up to $300, $400, $500 in addition to the rent that you didn't even know were going to be part of what you had to pay when you filled out your application. The result is that these prospective tenants are in a position where they're kind of locked in with this lease because they can't afford, those fees are non-refundable. They can't afford to say, oh, whoop, I can't afford that rent. I'm going to go look somewhere else. They're not necessarily going to have the money to be able to pay another application fee, another exorbitant application fee somewhere else, right? So what we're suggesting is that this practice of additional accessory fees be made transparent in the upfront marketing. So that everyone understands exactly what they're getting into when they're filling out an application to rent at a property. In addition, another practice that has come to light is that these fees frequently are far in excess of the actual cost of service that fee is applied to. So there are fees charged frequently for things such as garbage collection, pest control, internet access, things like that, right? Additional sort of common area power bills, for example. These are the kinds of things that are charged back as additional fees on top of the normal monthly rent. And if a tenant doesn't pay those, they're exposed to eviction just as if they didn't pay the rent. So what we're suggesting in this case is that these fees be required to be attached to the actual cost of service. A sixth recommendation that we're looking at would be to continue to push at the state legislature for for tenants to have a 7-day right to cure period prior to eviction. House Bill 404 right now is working its way through the legislature, and it looks like it may actually pass. It provides for a 3-day right to cure period. From zero, that's a step in the right direction, but it's also a baby step, right? If you're someone who's in the position where you're facing eviction and you need to be able to pull together some resources to keep yourself from being evicted. 7 days is a much better target. And we recognize that this is not something that the city itself can do, but what we're suggesting is that this item remain on the city's legislative agenda at the state capitol until such time as we can actually get a better outcome and more time, right? 7-day right to cure period. As well as written notice. I'm not sure if that written notice requirement is in HB 404. If it's not, that would be another thing to keep on the agenda. The seventh recommendation that we're looking at is to make administrative changes to the way that the city makes its code enforcement information public. Right now it is public information, right? But what can happen is that the code enforcement department will keep its reports closed due to the fact that there may be an open investigation on any given case. And sometimes those cases can drag on for a long time. And so that case remains closed and that information remains unavailable to the public. The result is that tenants who are facing eviction and may benefit from having information about code compliance issues with the property that they rent at, they may benefit from having that information in their eviction case. But if they can't get access to it because those files are closed, obviously that doesn't help them. Another result is that folks who are looking to rent at a property would benefit from being able to look that property up and easily understand whether that property has a history of code enforcement violations, or whether that property has a history of not having code enforcement violations, right? But as it is right now, the fact of the matter is that sometimes it's difficult for people to have access to that information. Code enforcement reports, a history of citations, current cases, and having that information would be very helpful in a number of different ways. So we hope that with the enaction of some or all of these recommendations that we can help provide some predictability to the process of renting apartments, some balancing of the power dynamic in the eviction process and in the landlord-tenant relationship in general, and also to help mitigate displacement, homelessness. Obviously, the evictions that are happening have long-term impacts on families' financial records. And again, since those records are checked when folks are looking to rent, if there's an eviction on their history, that's an excuse to not accept their application. So all of these things can help mitigate negative long-term impacts, both for families on an individual basis, but also the housing market in general. Again, I have Ms. Siegel and Mr. McFarland here to help answer any questions you all might have, but I'll be happy to answer any at this point.
Thank you so much, Mr. Stegenberger. Before I turn the floor over to colleagues, just one comment. Just as y'all are preparing to adopt this or some variation of these recommendations in the upcoming Housing Commission meeting, one thing I think will be helpful for us to help advocate for these items is if there's any sort of call outs or anything that you can put specifically that highlights whether something requires city action or county action or state action. I know that a lot of us are chomping at the bit to find more policies that we can enact that is within the city's purview, but I know oftentimes too, and you alluded to this as well, there are some things that require collaboration with the county, collaboration with the state. Saw Commissioner Hall yesterday, saw Commissioner Barrett this morning. I saw Senator McLaurin last week. And so even in those off-chance kind of encounters, to be able to socialize these sorts of issues so that we can make sure we're firing on all cylinders, I think will be helpful for us for our edification.
Yeah, our hope in a recommendation paper that we put forward, that it'll be pretty clear the things that can be done independently by the city and those that would require collaboration with the county or the state. Yeah.
If you can talk in the microphone, if you want to add to that.
Yes, William McFarland, Vice Chair. I wanted to speak to your point, because at some degree we may not be able to provide that clarity for you when we come forward with the recommendation. For instance, we get staffed by city law, but they won't give us that kind of legal opinion. And one of the things that we found, even as we debate potential policy, is that we get lost right where you are. It's like, well, is this something that the city can do? Or is this something that we need to go to the state to have done? Or is this something that we need to work with counties to achieve? I think that one of the ways that we're working to bring this recommendation to you all is to have the city, first of all, consider committing to working towards these tenant right recommendations. And then once you do that as a city council, you may then have to get the legal department and others to be able to come and answer those questions for us. Is this something that we can do legislation for? Is this something that we need to keep on the legislative agenda? Or is this something that we need to work with other counties to achieve? I just don't want to leave you all with the impression that we may be able to provide that level of clarity when we bring the recommendation forward.
Understood. Appreciate that clarification.
But we will certainly do our best.
Thank you. Hey, Councilmember Bakhtiari.
Well, first, Andy, thank you. I can think of few people in this world that have a better heart for this work than you do. And I'm very lucky that you are my constituent. I'm just going to lay claim to all my amazing constituents, like Lindsay Siegel over there, / neighbor. Hey, Lindsay. And this is, I do want to say a few thank yous on the pieces that have been done, the access to council piece that we've created. A huge thank you to AVLF for that. And that was 2 years in the making on my end before we got that done. And that one of the things and I want to thank Josh Humphreys and his team for helping with that, because I know that we have started with, I want to say, about 4 of the hardest hit zip codes, but we're working on expanding that. That was only started last year. And we want to, our goal is obviously to have it one day be citywide. So I know that we are going to commit to trying to expand that program and get additional funding this year as we build that out. And obviously I would love for it to move much faster, but we're working on it. And that's also thanks to you all for making those recommendations. And I do want to say, for the housing voucher paper that we got done, again, thank you to Josh. Real big thanks to Lindsay Siegel, who really held my feet to the fire on that one. And to you all, because now, we have now had that adopted by, so far, Invest and Beltline. And big thank you to Jill Johnson and to Councilmember Dozier for who sits on both those boards. But thanks for Jill for getting that across the finish line with ABI. And we still have Fulton County Development Authority and MARTA and are working on that as well, which, to those who don't know, it means that those public dollars, any developer who needs that money will now have to register with Atlanta Housing Authority and accept Section 8 housing vouchers. It's a start. We want to work towards a number, but it's a beginning. And in terms of everything else, I see what you mean. To your point, Mr. Vice Chair, I understand that. I think that maybe one of the things that we should consider is having a meeting with our Intergovernmental Affairs Director who lobbies with the state, maybe having a conversation about what the city can and cannot commit to. Because, Andy's very aware of how annoying I am, because I'll do this all day long in terms of the cure period and everything else. And I know that we have a lot of work to do there, because I know there are some really powerful lobbyists on the other side who have really watered down that legislation. And we still have a lot more to learn about the damages it could do and how we can make it better. And perhaps maybe one of the things that we should consider as council is also finding out, doing a preparation period going into legislative session well ahead of time. And that's something we need to do better at. So I promise that you have my commitment to doing a better job of that moving into this next year, and doing a debriefing with our IGA director and finding out how we can get ahead of the ball for next session. And then I was hoping you could elaborate on 7 around the code enforcement piece, because it's my understanding that once it goes enters into case or is heard as a case, it becomes public. So what is the piece that we can do to help? Could you kind of explain that again?
I have to rely on Lindsay for a little bit more information on this one.
We all have to rely on Lindsay.
Yeah. But as I understand it, it's a matter of the timing sometimes between when a case is filed, right? A citation is filed, and when that case is resolved. And that sometimes, if not frequently, while that case is in process, it's not always necessarily publicly available information because it's an ongoing investigation, and there's a provision in the Open Records Act that allows for municipalities to not make public information about ongoing investigations.
Okay.
So that's it. It revolves around that technicality to some degree. The argument is that sometimes that exception has value. Oftentimes in cases like we're talking about here, it's important for that to be public information.
Understood.
Right.
So I'm going to work with you all on that, and I know that I've already been texting with some of the staff about it to look into it to find out how we can improve that. So.
I will, one other quick thing to your point about the Access to Counsel program. I do want to acknowledge that this recommendation is based on the possibility of expanding that pilot program, right? So AVLF, for those who aren't familiar, the Atlanta Volunteer Lawyers Foundation has been funded with ARP funds to the tune of, I think, $500,000 to execute this pilot program that provides access to counsel for people facing eviction within certain distinct zip codes. Stands to reason that there are a lot of tenants outside of those zip codes that could use access to counsel support as well. And so what we're talking about here is basically an expansion of that program. We acknowledge that there is value in understanding how that program operates during this pilot period. Also that it will mean an uptick in resources if the program is going to be expanded citywide. But what we've understood from our research into similar programs in other cities is that, up to 84%, right, a very high percentage of eviction cases can be resolved with access to counsel for folks that are facing eviction, right? Very high success rate. So what we're talking about is essentially an expansion of that program, but also acknowledging that there's value in understanding how that pilot program has worked and using the data that comes out of that to help guide decision-making about expansion.
And we should have information. We have been fleshing out. We've been working hand in hand with AVLF on that. And also really big thanks to the Satterwhite Foundation for helping them launch their advertising piece and getting prepared to make that information more easily accessible. But to your point, yes, my commitment is to work towards expanding and getting additional funding and working hand in hand with AVLF to make sure that they have everything that they need. And then I just had one more question about number 3, the fee to file an eviction, increasing it. So on that piece, the ask would be for the city to work with the counties to raise that eviction filing fee.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to make that sure. And I know that we're going to get more in the packet that y'all are putting together. But thank you for this. Always appreciative of you. Thank you.
Hey, Councilmember Bakhtiari, Councilmember Amos.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just need a clarifying question. This is a comprehensive issue that both of you all of us have been working on for a while. But I think I heard whenever you bring forward some final recommendations, you will not be able to tell us if it's a standalone action that we can take, or would we need someone like county or state to, I know I heard that incorrectly.
There are times when we know.
I said we might not need
it. Yeah.
So what would we possibly need to do as a body to not encourage, but to give you what you need to bring that clarity to the conversation? What do we need to do on this end to make that happen?
The city's legal department is is a helpful resource until a certain point when they actually have to, represent the commission, right? Because the commission is not their client, right? So access to outside counsel, if you will, to help us understand where the guardrails are on issues like this between municipal law and state law or county law. That would be one of the things that would benefit the commission, is having access to that resource. We don't always need it, but it's clear that in cases like some of the issues on the paper here, it'd be very helpful to have. What we will be able to do, Councilmember Amos, is we know that some of these are things that the city can just do, right? But there are also some that are clearly going to require collaboration between the city and the county, and then some that will require collaboration between the city and the state. I think for the most part, we understand pretty clearly which of these will require which kind of collaboration and participation, but there may be one or two where it'll come down to legal interpretation and we're just not quite sure. But for the most part, we will try and make it as clear as possible as we can, right? Certainly the things that the city could be able to do on its own independently, and those which it could do in collaboration with the county.
And so I will only ask, when you come down to those things that we get stuck there, if you could, I guess, a separate email to the chair or myself to where those conversations can take place someplace else, if the committee can do that for us.
Yes.
Okay.
And I just want to ask if legal can add anything to that as well.
Yes, good afternoon, Amber A. Robinson, City of Atlanta Department of Law. The Housing Commission is a BACE as established by the Atlanta City Council, and therefore, should they require legal advice and counsel, the City of Atlanta's Department of Law is available to provide that to them. It's my understanding that there is some concern about whether or not that legal advice could be provided in open session, which of course, the City of Atlanta's Department of Law would have concerns with. Any executive session that the commission would wish to go into would be subject to the same rules concerning executive session as is the Atlanta City Council. However, that does not mean that they are not provided representation by the City of Atlanta's Department of Law. They do have an attorney in our office who staffs these meetings in the manner that I staff these meetings. And so I think maybe there might be some miscommunication there, and we'd be happy to straighten that out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Amos, you have anything else? Okay, all right.
That's music to my ears. Thank you.
Right. Councilmember Waits.
Good afternoon, Andy. Just wanted to thank you for your leadership on the commission.
All right. Any other questions or comments from colleagues?
One more, I'm sorry.
Councilmember Bakhtiari.
Sorry, Andy, for the first one, I'm guessing this would be kind of and I know we're going to elaborate on this more, but I just want to hash out as much of it as I can here for public record. On the first one, that would probably be like a Civics 101 piece that we would need to host in terms of educational programming to make accessible to constituents, going to them rather than having them come to us on educating them on the.
Yes, but also the pre-eviction diversion support services would be more of a program, if you will. Yeah.
Okay. And we'll delve into all of that when we have the materials. And I know that Lindsay and I are going to speak to the code enforcement piece more extensively. So thank you.
All right. Well, if hearts and minds are clear, Mr. Stegenberger, thank you so much. And thank you, Mr. McFarland, for joining us. And thank you, Ms. Siegel, for joining us as well. We'll look forward to the official adoption of the recommendations, and we will look forward to working together to make it a reality so that more Atlanta families can stay in Atlanta. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Hope to talk to you next month.
All right. All right, colleagues, as I had mentioned at the top of the meeting, we do have one more quick presentation just with the discussion around Forest Cove and Thomasville Heights being a topic of concern and heavily in the news. I thought it was important to have a representation from the administration to come speak to what's happening with the Forest Cove relocation and to be able to answer any questions that we might have. So we have Josh Humphreys here with the Mayor's Office of Policy. Did I get that office name correct? I know it's new, so I'm still working.
Yeah, it's a little close. Hey, everyone. Josh Humphreys, Senior Policy Advisor to the Mayor for Housing in the Mayor's office. Thank you for asking me to come and talk about Forest Cove. I know the committee is somewhat familiar at this point with Forest Cove, but just for context, anybody who might be listening that's not as familiar with it, Forest Cove is a 396-unit apartment building in southeast Atlanta, near the corner of Moreland and McDonough. And just over a year ago, I guess closer to a year and a half now, right after Mayor and City Council took office, Mayor went down with Councilmember Winston, walked Forest Cove, and experienced the deplorable conditions that were there. And so over the course of a couple of months, negotiated with both HUD and with Millennia, the property owner, to negotiate a relocation. Over the course of last summer into September of last year, relocated the 200 families that were there into new housing across the city, and funded that through ARPA funds, a $9.1 million the City Council authorized. So we are, I'll give an update kind of on where things are today. So one thing that we've done, now you've got around 700, a little over 700 people living around the metro area in some cases. We've stood up a hotline, and that hotline is a phone number staffed by 2 city employees out of the mayor's office that answer it night and day. If a resident has a question about anything, honestly, we're there to answer those questions. And that's been a really helpful resource, I think, for residents and for us to gather information about where there might be pinches or otherwise. And so when we get that information in, we'll call, whether it's the Atlanta Volunteer Lawyers Foundation or any of the other partners that we have, and say, hey, we've got this issue going on, can you address that? And so that's been kind of a quick hit thing. We've set that up just in the last month. We're also in the process of doing rebaselining for all the residents. So at the very beginning of this process, we did a needs assessment to identify the size of the households, any education needs otherwise for residents. But it's been well over a year since that was done, and residents have moved, and so we want to make sure that all of their, whether they have transportation needs, childcare needs, furniture needs, what have you. So we are in the process of doing that. We've called just over half of the residents so far and have made contact with a good, around almost 80 of the families. We've made contact. By the end of this week, we'll have all of them done. And that helps us understand kind of where individual issues are that we can quickly address, or if any systems issues where there might be something that's just not working very well that we need to address further. After relocation ended, we did have a slight change in the partnership team. So Community Foundation of Greater Atlanta is the main partner that we're working with on this. And then they had hired during the relocation both Open Doors and APD Urban to help manage the relocation. Because relocation is now over, both of those have phased out. But AVLF, as well as one of the original Tier 2 case management partners, we're increasing their work so that we can provide more wraparound services and case management related work. The on the ground, the conversations with the property owners to say, hey, we know this is going on, or even just kind of helping them navigate, to make sure they call their phone and say, hey, my stove's not working. Because unfortunately, the conditions were so bad at Forest Cove that many of the residents had been almost conditioned not to call for maintenance requests when they needed to. And so a lot of that coaching and talking with residents and saying, hey, this is available. We want you to have a high quality of life and make sure that those maintenance requests are addressed, help both the property owners and the residents alike. And so we've increased that portion of the workload during this period of time. So the other thing that I'll mention, there were a couple of things that came up at a committee meeting a couple weeks ago around both furniture and MARTA cards. And so during this needs assessment, we're addressing any remaining furniture gaps that may have so that we can address those directly. And then on MARTA cards, our partner AVLF on the ground is actually doing deliveries of MARTA cards. There were some issues around getting access to them, physical access to them. And so now we're taking them to residents so that's not a gap that exists for residents and they can continue to get around the city. The other thing I'll mention is that during the last couple of weeks, we were informed through Department of Community Affairs that Millennia, the property owner who had applied for tax credit funding to rehab the property, that application was denied and they did not receive tax credit awards. That would have rehabbed the property and then would have allowed for the residents then to move back on site. Since that was not awarded, we've started conversations. We actually started before then, but are in earnest with HUD about what next steps look like for residents, right? So without the tax credit award, There's no obvious, like, immediate path back to the Forest Cove property. But what we are doing now in exchange for that is we have been simultaneously working for the last 9 months to a year on a small area plan. So in addition to the Forest Cove property, we have 80 acres of publicly owned land around that. And in just over a month's time, we'll have legislation come to you to adopt a small area plan that looks at that land and we can have a mixed income community, taking the housing authority side, city land, and other publicly owned land in that area. And so what our commitment is, working with HUD and with the residents, is thinking about the long-term horizon, right? Like to address their immediate need for housing stability, but also create a pathway back to Thomasville Heights, whether that includes Forest Cove or not. Right now, that's still up in the air. There's a court case around the potential demolition of the property that will be heard in April, and then HUD's got to make a decision about what next steps happen with that property. But what we're doing alongside our partners and alongside all of you is making sure the residents don't get left out to dry in that we provide housing stability and ultimately a chance to come back to Forest Cove or toward Thomasville Heights.
Thank you. Before I turn the floor over to my colleagues, just a couple quick questions. The first is with Millennia not receiving the tax credit that I imagine they would need for serious financing for those necessary upgrades. What is the likelihood that Millennia will be part of a future deal or partnership, or is it kind of waiting to see what happens with that HUD decision?
Yeah, that's unclear right now. I think that will become much clearer over the next, let's say, 45 days or so. They had received, after they did not get awarded, right, they are now in conversations with HUD about what immediate next steps are. And then HUD will have to make a decision about the existing subsidy that is on that property that is currently used through what's called a HAP contract or Housing Assistance Payments contract with HUD. So it's unclear what Millennia's role in the long run will be on that. I think we'll find out a lot more in the next couple of months.
Okay, and the reason why I bring that up is I know that Millennia's reputation, is lacking outside of even the Forest Cove development, and so just recognizing that that's going to, I imagine, continue to be a pain point and a point of friction, both with residents and with the activist community that continues to be on the table. So just some of the things that have been relayed to me, I imagine to Councilmember Winston as well.
Sure. I'd say to that, shortly after kind of intervening at Forest Cove, the mayor launched a Problem Apartments initiative and to address, really bring safe and secure housing to all Atlanta residents. And so our goal here is to find property owners that will work with us to raise the standard of housing and maintain affordability in the long run. And that whether whoever is owners in Thomasville Heights, that's our goal and that's our expectation. So no matter, I don't know where everything lands on that, but I do know that will be what we continue to push for and continue to expect of any owner of Forest Cove or any property in Thomasville Heights or the city.
Good. And then just so the folks that have been relocated, do you know what percentage are still in transitional housing or like hotels and things like that? Or
no residents are in hotels.
Okay.
No one's, it's as of September 30th, 2022, all residents were in like stable permanent housing.
Okay. And then what's the feedback? I know we had the conversation, or y'all had I wasn't in that conversation, but how are people feeling about the process? I know this came up during the State of City breakfast this morning, but just kind of a vibe check. How are the residents feeling about how things have gone so far and where things are right now?
Sure. I'd say we jumped in kind of with both feet, with a whole bunch of energy, really wanting to help residents out of a really dangerous and kind of life-threatening situation in a lot of ways. Moving 200 families, 700 people across the city in earnest is a complicated process, and I take my hat off to everyone that was involved in that process and the way that moved. It's complicated, right? And so there were and continue to be these tiny little gaps that, oh, well, this didn't happen, right? Well, MARTA cards is a good example, right? We had a setup process that wasn't working for a few residents. So we shifted that up and said, you know what, we're gonna come to you. We'll bring the MARTA cards to your front door because we're already doing home visits. Let's solve that problem. So what I could say is that with the hotline that we now have in place and the communication flow between residents and both the city and our partners, when issues do come up, we're able to address them very quickly and make sure that residents' needs are addressed directly.
And just my last comment, any sort of action after report that y'all can do that can be shared with us so that, I mean, God forbid there's another situation with this sense of urgency. But I imagine the lessons learned that came out of this are significant and probably will help inform other opportunities to support communities in need. And the more we can keep that in mind and build out SOPs and things like that so that we can make this go as efficiently and effectively as possible for the future, I think will be helpful for all of us as we think about another situation that might.
Yeah, of course. I'd say that we've already, it was such an emergency situation that we had to intervene and help relocate everyone quickly. Part of our goal around the Problem Apartments Initiative is to get to properties before they get to the point that Forest Cove is in, to rehab them before they're in a devastating emergency solve situation. And so that, I think that is one of the lessons learned is like, let's not ever let another property get to the Forest Cove level. But absolutely would love to continue. I mean, I would love to continue giving kind of regular updates on this a very important project and one that we're focused on addressing. And we will have substantial updates over the coming months on this one, and happy to give kind of updates and lessons learned as we move along.
Councilor Lewis.
Thank you, and thank you for coming today. I know you and Councilmember Winston, the hotline has been amazing from folks. I actually had family that lived in Forest Cove, and since you all implemented the hotline, I know they are getting their requests answered way, way, way faster than they were. My questions are surrounding around the 80 acres that we have that you just mentioned, and Millennial not getting approved by the federal funding. Sure. Is there a chance that folks will not be able to come back since Millennial didn't get approved for funding?
So I think for us, the question is always giving the residents an opportunity to come back. We don't control the relationship with HUD, right? HUD has a private contract with Millennia Properties. They apply for tax credits and were not awarded those. So the obvious path for residents to come back would have been a rehab of Forest Cove and through the tax credit award process. That not being on the table, at least as it stands today, what we're working to do, we early on saw that it was the chances of them getting funded were at least up in the air. And so we started work on what we could do on the city-owned land. Said, okay, like what can we control in this process so we can make sure that residents that had to leave Forest Cove because of this have an opportunity to come back to the neighborhood. And so we're finishing the small area plan, as I mentioned, that's gonna move forward, work initial rezonings, and then getting out RFPs and development partners to build new housing on that publicly owned land, and some of the other private partners in the area that we've been working with that are also open to putting affordable housing on their sites. Our goal is to create housing opportunities for residents that are former Forest Cove residents to be able to come back to the neighborhood, even if it's not directly on the Forest Cove site.
I will say that that's gold, right? The Forest Cove land is gold. The Leela Valley, gold. Thomasville Heights, gold. People want to live right there. Yeah. A lot of new people that just moved into Atlanta want to live right there too. But we don't want to permanently impact folks that have survived the trying times. When we talking about every week we're out there putting new shovels down into the new belt line because they're building right there, right now. I think that if folks are not allowed, they have the same situation that happened with Bankhead Courts right now. I see a Bankhead Court situation type happening, but it's different because we're at least talking about people coming back, which we never said to Capitol Home, which we never said to Leela Valley and to Jonesboro South and Jonesboro North. My question after that is, with the $50 or $60 million that we found out last week, we didn't know, well, the department knew that they had $50 or $60 million that would be use it or lose it dollars, right? 50 to 60 use it or lose it dollars. Are we considering using our own, the 50 or 60 million use it or lose it dollars to cover the shortfall because HUD said no?
I'm not familiar with the specific funding sources, so I can't answer that specifically.
Atlanta Housing, they gave a report to us last week. It was housing, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. And I know Councilman Winston will speak to it too. But my question is that 50 or 60 use it or lose it million, I would like to see us look at Forest Cove and also Pavilion Place, because we're talking about getting in front of it, right?
Yeah.
And so I would like to open up that war chest before they take it back in Pavilion Place, and look at bringing back my folks like Ms. Wembley, because she don't want to live nowhere else.
Yeah.
She legit, she lives in Four Seasons. She used to live in Thomasville Heights. Her improvement in life was Four Seasons. And so Four Seasons turned to Forest Cove.
Right.
She want to go back to Four Seasons. She see Chosewood Park growing up. She see Lakewood Heights blowing up. She knows what's about to happen. She sees the resources, the food coming. We got grocery stores finally on the way. The elementary school that is about to close will probably open back up and be better than it's ever been ever. And so she wants that. And so the $50 to $60 million, I would like to, I know he's going to speak on it, and I don't want to be wrong about it. We got the smart people out here. If we can get you all to work together to spend that $50 to $60 million and make sure those black people that have been living there that long are able to come back. I know we're now looking at that 80 acres outside of that prime gold real estate, but they want that prime gold real estate back. Thank you.
On the 50, 60, I don't know the specifics, but I will look into it. I mean, I think we're committed to use that land and money we have available to build housing to the folks you're talking about, right? People who want to live there, no matter your income, to have an opportunity to live in Thomasville Heights.
Thank you, Councilmember Lewis. And our next speaker is Councilmember Winston. Please state your question or comment slowly so that we give our colleagues a chance so that we can regain quorum. Go ahead.
So thank you, Mr. Humphreys, for coming and giving this update. Obviously, we've been working together on this project for over a year. And I think from the start, and the mayor has talked about this, that the only real jurisdiction we had in this was the people. It wasn't the property, because this was under federal jurisdiction. So our number one goal from day one is always to make sure that we took care of constituents of District 1 and constituents of the Atlanta, and make sure they had, safe and adequate housing. And that's been our goal from day one. One of the unique things that happened in this process that has now, spurred a whole new office of policy and a whole new thinking of way we look at, any other potential property that could be in this situation is, how do we get people back into a community? And one of the things that happened from this specific situation is, I remember getting a call from Josh, was we found out we had 80+ acres of land in the area. So we had already started working on a plan B from day one, that what if Millennial didn't get their tax credits and there was no Forest Cove to come back to. And so we were lucky to have all of this publicly owned land, City of Atlanta land. So one of those pieces of property is a former Thomasville Heights Atlanta Housing Authority land, which is over 34+ acres of land. And so the development process for that land already happened starting a year ago. And so we quickly identified that would be the first piece of property that could be used to potentially bring back some of the Forest Cove residents, should they desire to come back. Now, we are having conversations with some people who are now in different places, and they're living in new apartments, new communities, and they may not want to come back. And so it's for those that do want to come back, they know that they'll have an option in some form or fashion to come back, whether it's at the old Forest Cove property or whether it's at some other city-owned property that we control. But because this property was found, we can take that model from the Thomasville Heights community and start doing that in different areas. And kudos to Josh and his team. The problem wasn't just central in Forest Cove, it was the surrounding community as well. And they've been engaging with former residents of Forest Cove, they've been engaging with the surrounding community and people who have been directly or indirectly affected by the conditions of Forest Cove for many years as well, and have brought them to the table. They've all had a seat there to be able to say what they want the future of their community to look like. And I am super excited about this area master plan that's coming out that we'll bring before my colleagues to socialize, so that we can all have a hand in what the future of the Thomasville Heights community looks like. But this is something that is going to be unique, and I'm really excited that Josh and his team have been really working on this. And so, Josh, you didn't really get a chance to kind of dive into it, but can you talk a little bit about the stakeholder community meetings that you've been having with folks from Forest Cove as well as the surrounding community about what the future of their community is going to look like?
Sure. Thanks for that. As I mentioned, about a year ago now, we started the planning process too, right? So we said we're going to relocate that. We got a whole team working on that. We got to carve out a few people to think about the future and think about what the neighborhood can look like. And that needs to involve current Forest Cove residents and also the single-family neighborhood just to the south of there and other key property owners and stakeholders in that area that can play a role in making that happen. So we've been meeting now monthly with a group of stakeholders, as well as having public meetings. We're toward the end of that, but I mean, that's feedback about, how do you want to use the 36 acres that Atlanta Housing owns? What do you want in your neighborhood? Do you want a grocery store? Is there a place that you really want that grocery store to happen? Are you looking for ownership, rental? What's the mixture? What kind of rec center desires do you? I mean, really thinking about how to build a whole healthy neighborhood alongside the residents and the key stakeholders in that neighborhood. And it's been very engaged. There's a rec center right in the middle of that neighborhood that we've hosted a lot of those meetings in. And they'll be, late on a Tuesday night, just in the gym, walking around, putting sticky notes on the board saying, "Oh, I really like this housing type," or "This is something I've always wanted in this neighborhood that we don't have here. Here's what I'm afraid of. How can we make sure we put a policy or plan in place or a program to help mitigate that?" And so there's a lot of, I could spend an hour and a half in the weeds on this, but there's little programs that we're already trying to get up and going around energy efficiency in the single-family homes that are just south of there, and thinking about really the whole neighborhood, right? And it's not just Forest Cove, because of the challenges that it created, ruminated throughout the entire neighborhood in a lot of negative ways. And so as we look to repair that and build a stable neighborhood, there are a lot of details. But I think this planning group that's been meeting for like the last year, and will continue to meet after the small area plan is done, because then we'll move into rezonings and getting everything really set up for the development to happen. I think having a team that's like saying, hey, for the next decade, we're together going to plan the future of this neighborhood and bring it out from where it was to something I think we can all be proud of, and that has the kind of mixed income neighborhood we want to see.
And I think to answer Councilmember Lewis's question specifically, the additional money funding that Atlanta Housing Authority may not necessarily need to be used for Thomasville Heights, because this is something that's already in motion. So I think the positive outlook of this is that could be used in District 12, or it can be used in 5 or 4 in other districts where we need affordable housing throughout the entire city of Atlanta. So
low-income housing, workforce housing.
Yeah,
and I think being able to see that, I mean, there is a blank slate in this community, lots of acres of land that we're going to be able to do something that's cool. That's just not about bringing people back to what could be the former Forest Cove site. It's bringing them back to a healthy, thriving community. I mean, we're talking about trails and connecting Entrenchment Creek. I mean, there's all types of things, and even the park conversations we're having is bringing back people to a healthy, thriving community, and I'm happy that we're a part of this process and look forward to seeing it through.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Winston. Councilmember Bakhtiari.
New suit?
I've had this for a while. It's my spring suit.
Really want to say thank you to you and to Councilmember Winston, who talk about a first year on council, like month one was just thrown into the deep end. I know this has been an ongoing thing, and I apologize for stepping out for a moment. I was following and have been. All the bigger questions, of course, have been asked. I think some mine are just smaller. Are the kids still able to go to Carver? Is the school secure enough? Are they dealing with under enrollment? Do we know anything of that nature? Are they okay?
So the students, some of the students had to move outside of the city of Atlanta. So depending on where they had to move to, our case managers actually helped set them up in schools that were proximate, right? Especially if a family didn't have a car, otherwise being able to get back to Carver or back to, Thomasville Heights Elementary is closed as a result of this as well, at least for a period of time. So students did move with their families, right? They had to move to, let's say, Lithonia. They moved, they set them up in a school there. And so one of the things that we're working right now is trying to solve for, and with HUD, is the timing around the next school year and figuring out kind of what housing stability looks like in the long run, so that students are in a stable place for the next school year as well.
Okay. I'm a little, I am worried about the elementary school, because obviously we suffered the same thing on Hosea with Whiteford Elementary, and almost went through the same thing with Toomer. We are keeping track of every family as well, and so do we have a timeline on bringing them back, which has probably already been answered, but.
So as far as keeping track on every family, one thing I'll mention, and I mentioned at the beginning of this, is we are doing updated needs assessment calls with so city staff is calling every single family and getting an update on kind of what challenges are you dealing with, childcare, fresh food access, what have you, and so that we can address those. And then have continued case management, but we wanted to do a rebaseline to make sure that needs were being addressed. As far as a pathway back, right now what we are working on is the long-term plan, what we can build on publicly owned land. That's what we can control that the most. And then working with HUD to figure out what next steps are now that Millennia was not awarded tax credits for the project. And then over the next couple of months, I think that'll get a lot clearer, and hopefully sooner than that, as far as what the immediate next steps are for those residents as it relates to Forest Cove and otherwise. So don't have an exact answer on that, but what we are doing is we will continue to serve residents and make sure that residents have all kind of the resources they need while we work to build long-term solutions back in Thomasville.
And I think one of my last questions was making sure they're coming back, combating the food apartheid in the area, something that of concern. But also, please know that I know that we are all resources for anything the family may need in the meantime. We have extensive networks, so if there's ever anything I can do to help get any needs met, please let me know.
Yeah, I mean, so when we get done with this needs assessment, I think we'll have a clear picture of where those gaps might be. So I'll circle back with you on that. You did mention the school and fresh food access. I think part of the benefit of having 80 acres and thinking about the next decade is the amount of housing that we can bring online there will make a grocery store more viable and make the elementary school less dependent on one apartment building in order to keep enrollment up and stay open. And so we're working closely with APS and looking at sites already where a grocery store could fit in that neighborhood, because really trying to think beyond just the housing units to how do we build a healthy Thomasville Heights. And so that's very much top of mind for us, and I've been working with APS on when we could get that school back online, and even if it makes more sense for us to have another school site, or I mean, we know we need elementary school in that neighborhood. What's the best A+ version of that, and how can we make sure that happens in the next few years?
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Bakhtiari. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, Mr. Humphreys, I just want to echo my colleagues and say thank you so much for coming down and joining us today. I know we've had a lot of these conversations. A lot of things have been happening. Y'all been doing the Lord's work in making sure we can support these families. I just thought it was important to make sure the public knew all the work y'all are doing every day to support the community of Thomasville Heights and in Forest Cove residents and their livelihoods and their quality of life. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me and for all of your continued support in making this possible. We couldn't do it without your support, so thanks.
Absolutely. All right, moving on to the next item on the agenda, going back to communications. There was one item that needed to be held, so we'll take that out. It was item number 5.
Item number 5 is 23C5052, a communication from Mayor Andre Dickens reappointing Ms. Michelle Nelson to serve on the Fulton County City of Atlanta Land Bank Authority. This appointment is for a term of 4 years to begin retroactively May 1, 2021 and expire April 30th, 2025.
I'll move to hold. I get a second. Second by Winston. Please open the vote.
Vote is open. The vote is closed.
The motion to hold is favorable, 6 yeas, 0 nays. We've already done section H, which is communications resolutions, so that takes us to section I, which is ordinances for first reading. Please sound the first item.
Item number 7, 23-01186, an ordinance by Community Development Human Services Committee to amend ordinance 23-01136 to clarify the appointing authority for the 2 members added to the composition of the Human Relations Commission, thereby and for other purposes.
All right, I think that's the only item for first reading. So that takes us to ordinances for second reading, which is item number 8.
23-01165, an ordinance by Community Development Human Services Committee to amend Part 3 Land Development Code, Part 15 Land Subdivision Ordinance to create new regulations regarding minor subdivisions of land and for other purposes.
We have with us Kieta Holmes with the Office of Zoning. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good afternoon, council members. The legislation before you will amend Chapter 15, which is our subdivision code here in the city. It will create regulations for what is called a minor subdivision. Minor subdivisions are pretty much the bulk of the subdivision applications that we receive in the Office of Zoning and Development. And as proposed, it would only allow the division of up to 3 new parcels. It would be on parcels that are already adjacent to an existing street where no new street is created, as well as where there's already existing sanitary sewer infrastructure already in place. What would happen is the application would move forward through our office, and the infrastructure with regard to sewer and with sidewalks would not be installed initially. It will be installed at a later phase, but it will get the subdivision process through quicker and to the clerk's office of Fulton County to be recorded quicker. This is a process improvement in our office, and it is supported by not only the Department of City Planning, but the Departments of Atlanta Department of Transportation and Watershed Management, which are all departments associated with the subdivision process.
I'm just out of curiosity, how much quicker do you think, how can we quantify those efficiencies? Like how many additional days or?
So the only issue, the subdivision review process lasts between 30 and 45 days. With this amendment, we're hoping to get it down to 30 days, but there is still a bit of a staffing issue. And until we're staffed up in all 3 of those departments, it will not go as quickly as we would like it to do.
Okay. Councilman Winston.
Would this legislation still allow for sidewalk waivers?
We would not have, it will allow for it, but it would be at a later phase when that would be brought to you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from colleagues? See, now I'll go ahead and move approval. Second by Bakhtiari. Any discussion? See none, please open the vote.
Vote is open. And the vote is closed.
Item is favorable, 6 yeas, 0 nays. Thank you, Director Holmes.
Thank you.
All right, next item, number 9.
23-01166, an ordinance by Community Development Human Services Committee authorizing the mayor on behalf of the Department of Parks and Recreation to accept a reimbursement grant award from Bright from the Start, Georgia Department of Early Care and Learning for the 2023 Summer Food Service Program in an amount not to exceed $790,680.00 in accordance with Section 2-910 of the Atlanta Code, and authorizing an amendment to the fiscal year 2023 intergovernmental grant budget to anticipate and appropriate, and authorizing the mayor or his designee on behalf of the city of Atlanta to enter into any necessary agreements in conjunction with the Summer Food Service Program and for other purposes.
Thank you. And we have Deputy Commissioner Doug Voss to speak to this.
Chairman Dozier and members of council, this ordinance allows us to pay from and accept a reimbursement grant from the state of Georgia Bright from the Start program. We spend about $790,000 serving over 3,000 kids during the summer. We offer the food service program when school is out at over 17 Camp Best Friends sites, as well as 15 out-of-site sites that we are looking for those locations even now, that we actually go out into the city, find apartments, find churches that want to participate in the program. This is probably one of the best programs that I think our department offers and the city offers, something we feel proud about, and we get reimbursed for it. So this allows us to set up the accounts necessary to receive the reimbursement. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions or comments? Councilman Bakhtiari.
Real quick, Mr. Voss, do you have any type of partnership currently with Columbia Properties at all?
Not that I'm aware, but that's not to say we don't. I can find that out for you.
If you would, because if you do not, I would love to recommend a couple of complexes that could really benefit from this program.
Shelby Beverly runs that program for us, and I will contact her and let you know.
Thank you.
Move to approve. Motion by Bakhtiari. I'll go ahead and second. Any discussion? Seeing none, please open the vote.
The vote is open. And the vote is closed.
Item is favorable, 6 yeas, 0 nays. Next item.
Item number 10, 23-01169, an ordinance by Councilmember Matt Westmoreland authorizing the mayor or his designee on behalf of the Atlanta Workforce Development Agency, aka WorkSource Atlanta, to execute a WorkSource Metro Atlanta Targeted Outreach Plan Agreement with the Atlanta Regional Commission in an amount not to exceed $20,000.00 for a term of 1 year commencing July 1, 2023 and ending on June 30th, 2024 with two one-year options to renew for the purposes of targeted outreach to increase participation in workforce programs and services. All contracted services shall be charged to and paid from the accounts listed herein and for other purposes.
All right, we have with us Sonia Wilson-Westmoreland, who is the WorkSource Atlanta Interim Executive Director. Good to see you
Yes,
again.
good day, everyone, to Councilmember Dozier and all of the other council members. We are requesting approval to enter, can you hear me? Approval to enter into a regional outreach agreement with ARC, and it should not exceed $20,000. We're asking for it to be from 2023 to 2024 with the option of one-year renewals after that. And it has been approved by our WorkSource Board in September of 2022.
Any questions or comments from colleagues? All right, there's a motion to approve by Bakhtiari, second by Councilmember Winston. Any discussion? Seeing none, please open the vote.
The vote is open. And the vote is closed.
An item is favorable, 6 yeas, 0 nays. I believe that concludes our ordinances for second reading. That takes us on to resolutions. First item is item number 11.
It's 23R3323, a resolution by council members Michael Julian Bond, Jason Winston, Byron Amos, Jason Dozier, Howard Shook, Dustin Hillis, Marcy Collier Overstreet, Antonio Lewis, Matt Westmoreland, and Keisha Shawn Waits, requesting the establishment of a commission to determine the appropriate manner in which to honor Robert Bob Mance and for other purposes.
I know the author is not here. However, I believe all of us are co-sponsored on this legislation. We're supportive. I'll actually, Councilmember Bakhtiari.
Two things. One, can you add my name? And two, can we correct the spelling of Councilmember Amos's name?
I'll second the amendment.
Unless you're down with us starting to call you Brian.
Please open the vote. There's a motion to amend by Bakhtiari, second.
The vote is open. And the vote is closed.
The item has been amended to add Councilmember Bakhtiari's name and to correct the spelling of Councilmember Amos. Motion to approve as amended by Bakhtiari. I'll second. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. And the vote is closed.
The item is favorable as amended, 6 yeas, 0 nays. That takes us to our next item, item number 12, which is Resolution 23-R-3326. Colleagues, I believe there is a substitute for this. Do we need to read I know that a substitute is going to change the caption, but do we need to read the original caption before we start?
Just vote on the substitute, and I'll
Okay.
read that caption.
I'll move to bring forward the substitute. There's a second by Winston. And just to clarify, colleagues, the substitute, like I mentioned, clarifies that it's going to be 25% of net revenue, not all revenue, and it splits that into 6.25% amongst four categories. So that's what the substitute does. So there's a motion to bring forward the substitute by myself. Councilmember Winston seconded. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. Vote is closed.
Right, the motion to bring forth the substitute is favorable, 6 yeas, 0 nays. I'll give the author, Councilmember Lewis, an opportunity to speak to the legislation before we take on further action.
I can read that caption.
Yep. I will say that this is an opportunity for us to invest in workforce housing, not affordable housing, but workforce housing, sustainability, infrastructure, and youth development, and to use 25% of to allocate 25% of all monies generated, and to split it up amongst the four different buckets is going to be an improvement to the city of Atlanta forever. And so for as long as the police training facility, the public safety training facility is around, for as long as it's generating funds, which we assume is going to happen because this happened before we were elected. This was planned before we were here. This is us trying to make this paper as forward-thinking and as helpful to the city as possible. And so I move approval.
Thank you. There's a motion to approve by Lewis. I will second that, and then I know there's a couple of points of discussion. We'll give Councilmember Bakhtiari the floor to ask.
Councilmember Lewis, thank you. And I was hoping that you could clarify that prior to this, all the money would not have gone to the, could you speak to the fact that all this money would have gone directly back to, I think, the agency building it? So this puts it back into the community. And I want to say for the record, because my district is quite split on this topic, that this is me voting for this is because this is planning for what has already been put into motion. As Councilmember Lewis said, this happened before we were on council. So this is planning because I agree the money should not go back to the entity building this facility. It should go back into the community, or a portion of it anyways. So I just wanted to make that clarification, and thank you.
And I will just also clarify as well, and why we did the substitution. This is net revenue. I recognize that when you build any sort of capital project, you have debt service and some things like that. So this is above and beyond that item. So I just wanted to clarify that. So Councilmember Lewis.
And I appreciate y'all, but on that, I'll say that we're fighting like heck. We're fighting like heck to make public safety in Atlanta different, right? We're fighting our butts off to do this as best as possible. And when I hear Councilmember Bakhtiari say that this was already done before we got here and the funding will all go back to this organization, this is us saying, hey, we got here, we saw the book already written, and we're trying to edit some of the chapters in the book. And so I appreciate working with this dais of people because we have the most progressive council in the city of Atlanta history. And when we talk about how our districts are not monolithic, right? You have some folks who, like Adema in my district, I grew up with, who does not want to see this built at all. But then you also have Ms. Shirley Nichols and Ms. Ann Phillips, who both live in my district, who want to see this happening. And we're already at the stage to where the land lease has been signed. It's been taken out of the hands of city council. It's my job to fight like heck, fight my butt off to make the Atlanta public safety training, any safety training in Atlanta, whether it's fire, police, E911, it's my job to make them better than anywhere else in the world. And I think that this dais is the dais that I would trust to do it. So thank you.
So the item has been motioned and seconded. Please open the vote.
And as you vote, the caption reads, it's 23R3326, a resolution by council members Antonio Lewis, Jason Winston, Byron D. Amos, Jason Dozier, Dustin Hillis, Andrea L. Boone, Michael Julian Bond, Matt Westmoreland, and Keisha Sean Waits, as substituted by the Community Development Human Services Committee to allocate 25% of all amounts of net revenue generated from the Public Safety Training Center to workforce housing, sustainability, infrastructure, and youth development, and for other purposes. The vote is open. The vote is closed.
Item is favorable on substitute, 6 yeas, 0 nays. I also want to add that this is a dual referred item, so it will go before Finance Executive Committee tomorrow. So for our colleagues, you have another crack at the bat tomorrow with this particular item. With that, that takes us to our next item, number 13.
23R3338, a resolution by council members Jason Dozier, Jason Winston, Liliana Bakhtiari, Alex Wan, Howard Shook, Matt Westmoreland, Mary Norwood, Dustin Hillis, Andrea L. Boone, Marcy Collier Overstreet, Michael Julian Bond, and Keisha Sean Waits to adopt the goal of achieving and maintaining 50% average tree canopy cover within the city of Atlanta, and to request that the Department of City Planning use this goal to guide future updates to the tree protection ordinance and other land development related ordinances, and to request that the Department of City Planning conduct a study every 5 years to measure the tree canopy cover within the city in order to evaluate the effectiveness of the tree protection ordinance and other land development related ordinances in reaching and maintaining the 50% tree canopy cover goal and for other purposes.
We have Andrew Walter with the Department of City Planning. Good to see you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. This resolution really formalizes something that much of Atlanta thinks has been a goal for a good while now. You can see references in newspaper articles to Atlanta's goal of 50% canopy going back years. The other thing that it would do is it would set a clear goal, somewhat vague, but still, a goal for any tree protection ordinance updates in the future. There's at least something clear that we can strive towards and then measure against when we reevaluate the ordinance over the years. It also, it gives us a clear direction in where we're going. It notes that we are losing canopy and we don't want to do that anymore. And in fact, reverse that.
Yeah, and one of the things I'll just add is, as the author or sponsor of this legislation, I think that goal setting is important, and for us to look at all the opportunities to be able to achieve those goals. I know we're going to talk about protection and preservation as part of the next round of tree protection ordinance conversations and work sessions, but the more we can do to center that goal at the neighborhood level, at the NPU level, at the city council district level, as we have projects go before permitting, as we have projects that are receiving public subsidy through Invest Atlanta. I think there's a lot of opportunities to ensure that we are doing everything in our power to grow the city of Atlanta's tree canopy in as equitable a way as possible. I know different communities have different beliefs about how valuable trees are. For some, trees are things that need to be protected at all costs. For others, folks see trees as a hazard and things that, with the rain and the hailstorm that we got the other night, I know that for that latter group of people, that fear is very profound. So I'm glad that we're looking at moving in the direction that is quantifiable, and that allows us to set goals across all facets and verticals that we have as a city. So just thank you all for putting this together. I'll give my colleagues the opportunity to provide their comments and ask questions, and then we'll go from there. Councilmember Winston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Walter, the legislation says we will conduct a tree canopy count every 5 years. When would the first scheduled count happen?
The first one actually occurred in it was measuring the canopy from 2008.
Okay.
So we've had 3 studies. The first one, 2008. The second one was 2014, and then another one in 2018. So it's been, it was 4 or 6.
So we'd be scheduled for one now.
So we would be scheduled for 2023. Yeah, we would get the aerial photos shot in, or the satellite photos shot in October when the leaves are off.
And when would you estimate we would be able to receive that count?
It's taken, we've used Georgia Tech, and it's taken several years in the past. So I would anticipate, David?
Good afternoon.
State your name.
My name is David Zaporanik. To answer your question, I don't think that it would take as long this time, because in 2018, there were issues with Department of Procurement and getting the contract going, and then COVID happened, so there were delays. But hoping there's no other delays like that, then if we get the images in October, then perhaps it'll be about a year or a year and a half, depending.
And then I know a lot of our tree protection ordinance conversations have been around development in the city and what that looks like and recompense for that. I think some of the conversations that I feel like have not been amplified are about our aging tree canopy. Different, Southeast Atlanta, my district, Councilmember Lewis's district, there's a lot of stormwater runoff erosion issues. Trees are at the end of their life cycle. And so, we're losing trees after big storms like the one that just hit Atlanta. And I'd like to see more of a conversation around what does it look like, I guess, to achieve that 50% goal, wrapped around the fact that we're losing a lot of our old trees here in the city of Atlanta, and how recompense is going towards being able to preserve that as well. So just kind of putting that out in the forefront, because I feel like that conversation is not being put out there because so much of it is being dominated about the development piece as well.
That's a really important point, that the tree protection ordinance is not alone going to get us to the 50%, we don't think. It's going to be a combination of development, the tree protection ordinance, which is really a development ordinance, plus planting and tree management or maintenance programs. So one of the things that has been called out in the tree ordinance ever since it was written is the need for an urban forest master plan, which would be looking in specific detail at issues like the aging tree canopy in Southwest Atlanta and a replacement program and planting locations and so on and so forth. So that is probably a need to really have a robust planting and management program to fill in, the other pieces of the puzzle that the tree protection ordinance isn't going to address.
And just bringing it back to my colleagues, I think this brings us back to the earlier conversation around Parks and Recs maintenance as well, because we're relying on a lot of Friends of Grant Park Conservancy, for example, was an organization that I was a part of where we use volunteers to come in and help, maintain the health of the trees that were in the park. And so, when we talk about maintenance, I don't think that that's something that our Parks and Recs department is really able to focus on, which is the preservation of a lot of our old tree canopy in some of our big parks, like Grant Park or Piedmont Park, that are also losing numbers of trees after big storms and throughout the city of Atlanta. So just tying that back to the maintenance conversation that we had earlier, that there could be some coordination with our Parks and Rec department in terms of figuring out how we work to strengthen this ordinance as well. So
certainly, and Doug Voss is still here, and I suspect that he would say that additional funding would be helpful. I have heard for many years that the forestry crews that the Parks Department has are quite spread. They're spread thin, and are having trouble keeping up with just the bare minimum of removing the dangerous trees rather than.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Lewis.
So I would just caution us as the part of the reason why I didn't sign this on the 50% average tree canopy the entire city, because I would caution us on having the right amount of tree canopy and development in each district. And I say that thinking about August 3rd, 1959, when Lenox Mall was a forest, when South River Garden, where they're building the proposed public safety training facility, was concrete, right? In 1961, Phipps Plaza, 1971, Perimeter Mall were all forest. At the same time, Thomasville was houses. Right now it's trees. Right now it's a forest. Same time, Lila Valley and Gilbert Garden, which we call Pool Creek, were housing. And right now they're forests. And so I would just caution us, and partly why I didn't sign this, partly why I was staying today, is because I don't think it's been done. I don't think we're looking at it equitable. And I would like for us to be in the room as we're in these meetings to be thinking about Councilman Lewis saying in 1959, Lenox Mall was a forest. 1969, that's 10 years later, Phipps Plaza was a forest. 1971, based on the forest rules of today. And I'm thinking about Perimeter Mall as well. And so I'll look at the development that has happened around our city over the last 30 years, and I'm seeing development, and I'm seeing it a little different. So I would caution you to always think about the tree canopy on a district level as well.
Most definitely. This is not a monolithic 50% everywhere, like lot by lot or district by district. This is citywide because obviously different parts of the city there's different levels of canopy that are appropriate for different parts of the city. Downtown is unlikely to ever have 50% canopy, whereas some areas, a lot of residential neighborhoods are in the 70 and 80%.
So what I'm asking is the opposite. I'm asking that, I'll give you an example. Lenox Mall, right now we have you tear down a tree, you put up a tree based by the inch, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm seeing trees, I drive down Pryor Road, and I'm seeing trees that are falling off because they shouldn't be planted on the side of the sidewalk that's closer to the street.
I got you.
All over my district, right? And I met with Trees Atlanta, so I'm not just talking to you. I met with Trees Atlanta. My question was, if I tear down every tree for Lenox Mall, where do I have to put up every tree I tore down in that district? They said, no, you can put it up anywhere. In fact, you don't have to put up one in that district. You can actually go to District 12 and put them all up in District 12. And so I asked, could you do that?
Mm-hmm.
And because I know the development happened a little faster in certain parts of the city, but we on the way. Like Deion Sanders said, we coming, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the development is coming, and we're going to talk about low-income housing and workforce housing where it used to be, but right now we're also calling those locations forests, right? And so I want to remind folks what the Atlanta looked like, because the group project, when we brought Buckhead in, we made sure we gave all the development funding to building Lenox Mall, Phillips Plaza perimeter, because it's a group project. But right now in this group project, it's time to develop the rest of the city as well, and we need for everybody to have the fair share amount of trees. So that as we get closer to this 50% tree canopy, I would like for District 12 to have to where people used to live, like Gilbert Garden, where 5,000, wherever people used to live, I want to bring people back. And so I would caution you on that.
Sure. There's always going to be a bit of a tension between trees and development, but I think that there is a happy ground where
I choose people every time, just know that.
I don't think they have to be exclusive.
Okay, me either.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councilmember Lewis. Councilmember Bakhtiari.
So first of all, thank you. One of the things I wanted to clarify was the piece on making sure it's canopy and understanding that when we talk about canopy, we are talking about that upper habitat. Because as much as I love a crepe myrtle, as much as I love a tree under a power line, that's not canopy. And so I'm thankful for the clarification. Councilmember Lewis brings up really good parts on equity. One of the things that concerns me about this, why this is so important, is because Atlanta's in top 5 for worst energy burden in the country, meaning that the cost of utilities and everything else, which will only go up because of heat waves, cold snaps, random hail on a warm day. All of these things these 100-year storms that are now occurring every summer will contribute to that issue. And what helps to offset that? Tree cover. But of course, one of the things that concerns me is that we're running out of space to plant trees. It concerns me that Southeast Atlanta actually has been recorded as one of the worst one of the worst areas for air quality right now in the country. And so I'm really glad that we have taken this step. I'm saying all this to say that thank you for taking this. I think that the heat vulnerability assessment that we're working on, that's block by block breakdown, because it's air quality in my district and the quality of life in my district is very different from my colleagues sitting to the left of me. My area is, I mean, you go north and life expectancy goes up 20 years when you're in Buckhead or in North Fulton versus in South Atlanta. And all of this contributes to that. And so I think it's extremely important to talk about maintaining our current canopy to the point that Councilmember Winston brought up, planning for a new canopy. And I'm going to get very creative with that in my district, mapping old growth, notifying people of what they have growing in their yards, asking them to maintain it, trying to come up with all kinds of ways to make that happen. But I am very excited for the next part of this conversation because I'm grateful to DCP for taking on such a challenging piece. Andrew, I promise we can talk about, paying for your therapy after the next session. David, we can need to talk about additional funding for your division because y'all cannot do this on your own the way you're going with the level of development in this city. And I just hope, I will continue helping to frame this in a more holistic conversation in terms of air quality, life expectancy, quality of life, all of that, because it fits into everything.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well, if there are no other questions or comments, I'll move approval. Second by Bakhtiari. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
The item is favorable, 4 yeas, 1 nay, 1 abstention. All right, next item.
Item number 14, the members will find a substitute in their packet.
Your oops. Okay. All right, the item is favorable, 3 yeas, 1 nays. So we have 3 yeas, 1 nay, 2 abstentions for this item. It still remains favorable. Is that correct? All right. All right. Next item.
Item 14, there's a substitute in your packet. Would the committee like to bring forward that substitute?
Yes, and colleagues, the substitute essentially, so there was an error on this paper to strike the contractor Metropolitan Security, which was included in the error, and so please bring forth the substitute.
Who's the second?
I move to bring forth the substitute. Can I get a second by Bakhtiari? Please open the vote.
Vote is open. The vote is closed.
Okay, the motion to bring forward the substitute is favorable, 6 yeas, 0 nays. Please read the caption. Thank you.
Reads 30. It's 23R 3341. A resolution by Councilmember Byron D. Amos, as substituted by Community Development Human Services Committee, authorizing the mayor or his designee on behalf of the City of Atlanta to execute Amendment Number 1 to the agreement listed here on post-certified officers with Cloverhurst Aaron JV, and to add additional funding in an amount not to exceed $1 million and 0 cents, subject to and contingent upon the adoption and approval of the fiscal year 2024 budget on behalf of the Department of Parks and Recreation and for other purposes.
Deputy Commissioner Voss.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of council. This resolution authorizes amendment to an existing contract that was approved by this council in November of last year. It provides security to many of our DPR events. It will actually be the tool we use to provide security at our 12 outdoor pools that we're running this summer. It'll provide security at our midnight basketball. And as a shameless plug, next week it'll provide security at our teen basketball tournament held at CT Martin. We have over 20 teams participating, including a team from Chicago that's coming down on Monday to play our teens. So we're super excited about that. It's been a very effective contract to have, and this allows us to add additional strings and funding to make sure that we're using the appropriate string for the type of event that we're trying to secure.
Councilman Lewis.
I would like to be added to this paper. I hope that the APF are listening because we just said that we pay security, off-duty officers, or off-duty security company for our midnight basketball games, for our little league games for our kids. We just said that the city of Atlanta pays every single time $1 million to that. That's more. That's a huge percentage of Parks and Recreation budget. We could pay for all of our kids to go to summer camp free, and we could pay for every student in the city of Atlanta to play all sports free with $1 million. So I hope that the APF is watching this. But I'm signing on if possible, and I'll second this with you, brother.
So there's going to have to be two separate actions. So there's a motion to approve or to amend by Lewis, add his name to the paper. I'll second that. Any discussion or anyone else want to add their names to it? So we can. And Councilmember Waits would like to add her name to the paper. All right, please open the vote. All right, the motion to amend is favorable, 6 yeas, 0 nays, and Councilmember Lewis, you have a motion to adopt as amended. Well, actually, it's on substitute as amended. Is that the correct? So, Councilmember Lewis, let me make sure I state this correctly. You are motioning to approve on substitute as amended, and I will second that. Councilmember Amos made the motion. Lewis, I'm not going to say all those words again. Amos made the motion, seconded by Lewis. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. And the vote is closed.
All right, the item is favorable on substitute as amended. Thank you. All right, that concludes our resolutions. However, colleagues, we have 3 items that we need to pull off of held. These are related to CDP amendments that were held because of needing to move with associated zoning papers. We have Ms. Lavendier who will speak to them, but we'll go ahead and read the captions and then we'll go from there.
Item number 30 is 22-1905, CDP 2301, an ordinance by Community Development Human Services Committee to adopt the Atlanta Beltline Subarea 4 Master Plan Update, to amend the 2021 Comprehensive Development Plan to incorporate by reference said plan, and for other purposes. There's an amendment in your packet to attach an updated Subarea 4 Master Plan.
I'll go ahead and move to amend. Take a second. Second by Bakhtiari. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
Item is amended, 6 yeas, 0 nays. Ms. Lavinier.
Yes, thank you. Jessica Lavinier with the Office of Zoning and Development. And as you know, the Atlanta Beltline has sub-area plans. There are 10 sub-areas throughout the Beltline. And those plans were first created 10 years ago. And over the past several years, they've been updating each sub-area plan. So in 2021, the staff started working on sub-area 4. And this is a guide for growth and development along the Beltline to ensure that we have a vibrant, mixed-use, transit-oriented community along the Beltline. And this is in Council District 1 and 5 and in MPUs N, O, and W. So the plan had extensive community engagement with the stakeholder group starting in 2021. And just between January and now, they had 13 additional community meetings to present the recommendations of the plan. And those recommendations focus on land use, mobility, housing, parks, and economic development. So we use this recommendations every time there's a rezoning. We look at what the plan recommends, and it's also their guide for the work that they do. And Lynette is here, and Beltline staff, if you have additional comments or questions, but staff recommends approval of the plan.
Any questions? Councilmember Bakhtiari.
Well, first of all, Lynette, thank you for everything you did and for working so patiently with my district. We have a lot of opinions, I know. And I know that we're working on the watershed piece in Reynoldstown. I want to say, like, while I'm in favor of adopting this, I know that conversation's not done yet, and I just want to make that clear for the record to any of my constituents who may be listening in. We are not done on the water tower piece. So I just wanted to say that. But I really especially wanted to thank you for dealing with all of our zoning stuff. But Lynette, thank you so much for the work, for your diligence in this project and for the community outreach. Thank you very much. And I'll move to approve.
I forgot to mention that all NPUs voted to support the plan. And I know it was held because NPU N wanted additional review, as you stated. Yes.
Just obviously, this is a complex issue because Watershed is talking about using this tower for reserves. But we are in negotiations to do something temporary in case this ever does become available. So we're working on that. And thank you to y'all for working with us on that. And I move to approve.
Motion to approve by Bakhtiari. Well, to approve as amended by Bakhtiari. Second.
Motion to approve as amended.
Second by Winston. Please open the vote.
Vote is open. The vote is closed.
The item is favorable as amended, 6 yeas, 0 nays. That takes us to item number 36.
Item 36 is 23-0-1113, CDP 2239, an ordinance by Community Development and Human Services Committee to amend the land use element of the 2021 Atlanta Comprehensive Development Plan so as to redesignate property located at 950 West Marietta Street Northwest and 0 West Marietta Street from the industrial land use designation to the mixed use land use designation and for other purposes.
All right. Ms. Lavinier.
Yes, thank you. This is the former Meade paper site that it's in Council District 3 and an MPUK, and it's called now Westside Paper Development, and the property owners have been redeveloping the warehouse to to office and retail, and there's a portion that's vacant where they want to build some multifamily residential, so that requires the land use and zoning amendment. So this is consistent with the Council District, the Westside Revive plan that we did several years ago, and also with the Beltline Sub-Area 9 plan to keep jobs in the area, but also to bring some residential, and it's consistent with like Puritan Mills, it's just south of there, and also the rezoning that was done on the other side of the Beltline is going right through there. So staff recommends approval of this land use amendment to the mixed-use land use. This was before NPUK, and they voted to support this at their February meeting.
Any questions or comments from colleagues? Motion by Amos. I'll go ahead and second. Please open the vote.
Vote is open. The vote is closed.
Item is favorable, 6 yeas, 0 nays. Next item, number 37.
Item number 37 is 23-0-1114, CDP 2302, an ordinance by Community Development Human Services Committee to amend land use element of the 2021 Atlanta Comprehensive Development Plan so as to redesignate property located at 2120 and 2130 Marietta Boulevard Northwest and the parcel ID listed here from the industrial land use designation to the mixed use medium density land use designation and for other purposes.
Yes, thank you. This is in the Bolton neighborhood of NPUD in Council District 9, and it's a facility that's operated by the Bobby Dodd Institute, and they want to build residential and keep their warehousing there on the site. It's almost a 4-acre site. This is in the Chattahoochee Industrial District, and as you know, our policy is to maintain that as one of the premier industrial sites in the city, where if we want to have middle income, middle wage jobs that don't require a college degree, those jobs need to be somewhere in the city. And often those are construction jobs, transportation jobs that need to be in an industrially zoned area. So if we lose all of our industrially zoned property, then those jobs are going to be difficult to locate in the city. This area in Chattahoochee Hills, is Chattahoochee industrial site, is served by transit, is in proximity to many neighborhoods, so it's easily accessible. And when we lose the industrial jobs, they go to a suburban location that's hard to get to. So that's why we work hard to preserve our industrial land uses in the city, and we consistently recommend denial of the continuous rezoning of our industrial jobs away from those types of uses. We have a lot of locations where we could have mixed-use development, residential, and proximity to transit along corridors that would be better suited for this type of development. So staff recommends denial of this land use amendment. And this was before NPUD, and they voted to support the land use amendment.
So the NPU voted to support?
That's right. Mm-hmm. They live in an industrial area, but are concerned with, traffic and things like that, and that are part of being in an industrial area, but we need industrial uses to support, everything that the city needs.
Good. Colleagues, I'll go ahead and move to approve, just because I recognize Councilman Hill is no longer on this committee, but I do want to express his wishes. Any questions or comments before? Actually, I need a second, sorry. Second by Bakhtiari. Any final questions or comments before we open the vote? Seeing none, please open the vote.
Vote is open. The vote is closed.
Item is favorable, 5 yeas, 0 nays, 1 abstention. All right, that concludes our legislative items for today. Not quite yet. Any general remarks from colleagues before we wrap up? I have a couple real quick. The first is that this Thursday, if you enjoyed this wonderful 3-hour CDHS meeting, there's more CDHS this week. CDHS, along with the zoning committee, is hosting a joint work session to discuss the dual referred legislation 23-0-1084, which is about short-term rentals. So it will be 1:00 p.m. in the city council chambers. Hope you will join us. And then just a reminder, all the items that we approved today will see the next full council meeting, which will be April 17th, so almost a month from now, or 3 weeks, I guess-ish, because we're going to be on recess beginning next week for a 2-week period. So hope to see you all there, hope to see you at the work session. And with that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much.